Chapter 301 Energy Paradise. After reading the analysis report, Chance, the eyes of Leviathan, and the team members all lit up. They all saw a huge opportunity. Develop rapidly and gain access to a large amount of resources and benefits. As long as they have a good start. Take the first official step. Gain a firm foothold. And accumulate for a period of time. They will be in an undefeated position. No matter which force they are. They have to fawn over and please. And establish close cooperation. And finally rise to become a giant. Control huge power. Embrace unlimited interests. In short, become a huge winner. The best breakthrough point is naturally the energy industry. This industry is also the industry that Leviathan and others are best at and understand best. It can bring huge benefits to cooperating users without harming the interests of too many people. It can quickly make the pie bigger and gain strong support from partners. And can continue to cooperate forever. In this huge world, the concentration of spiritual energy particles is very high. And there are many traces of extraordinary power. The strength of an individual may be so powerful that it can lift mountains and burn rivers and seas. It is comparable to a human-shaped nuclear bomb. But no matter how powerful it is, the ability to continuously output is still limited. And the energy and spirit contained in the body is still limited. And it is impossible to explode infinitely. It is not comparable to the nuclear fusion reactor inside our spacecraft. And the power is unlikely to exceed 1 billion kilowatts or even tens of billions of kilowatts. So in terms of how the energy is used, we still have the advantage. Let's call this world the fairy world. We can see that the inner circle of the fairy world has extremely high light intensity. The surface temperatures of nearby planets and continents are extremely high, easily reaching hundreds or thousands of degrees. It is difficult for normal people to survive. Continues. But the energy density is very high, which is very suitable for us to develop the space energy industry. Through one photovoltaic collection converter, we can collect a massive amount of energy, even if it only collects 1/10,000th. It is estimated to be enough for all planets, and if used on the mainland, the potential is extremely huge. On the outskirts of the fairy world, the temperature is very cold, with the average temperature generally around tens of degrees below zero. There is only very weak light, and the growth of plants is slow, allowing only a small amount of life to survive. The population density is extremely low, perhaps hundreds of square kilometers of land. There is no indigenous life on the road, and there are large tracts of uninhabited land. If we build and start up a nuclear fusion reactor on this road, a small reactor with a power of only 100 million kilowatts, then it will bring the energy obtained can still guarantee the survival of hundreds of millions of indigenous people, grow countless amounts of food, live a prosperous life with no worries about food and clothing, and have a more prosperous and lively civilization. Therefore, peripheral areas are more suitable for us to engage in nuclear fusion. The reactor-type energy industry will also give countless local indigenous people hope and actively cooperate. Considering that there are many extraordinary beings and immortal cultivators in this world, we must also strengthen the construction of military force and have enough self-protection strength. In this way, even if some indigenous forces are jealous of our industry and launch an attack, if they try to plunder our assets, we will dispatch super god mechas and combat mechas to eliminate these greedy coveters and ensure that our interests will not be infringed upon by any natives. This is also a more important task. Science Officer Shinshirin and others expressed their thoughts one by one, and they were all very excited in their words. Nod. Leviathan nodded repeatedly to express his approval. He also realized that in this extremely large fairy world, although there are many powerful forces and countless destructive individuals, it is even possible to kill a super god mecha with one palm. And its combat power is beyond the limits of imagination. But he is confident about developing the energy industry here and has a fairly complete plan. After all, there is no shortage of energy here in the fairy world. The huge star is the producer of huge energy. As long as the central star does not burn out, the infinite energy will not be exhausted. This is one of them. Secondly, the basic laws of the purely physical world are basically the same in this world. Whether it is the principle of explosion, the principle of nuclear fusion, and other various physical laws, they are exactly the same as those recorded in the Azure Star textbook. But there are more the existence of aura particles, dark energy particles, and other aura particles. Although these aura particles will weaken gravity and affect some chemical and physical properties, the principle of explosives has not changed much. Nuclear fusion can also be used at extremes. Under high temperature, pressure, and speed, the particle flow will overcome the weak force between atomic nuclei and lose to the strong force, so that the fusion reaction occurs. The principles and rules in this regard have not changed and can proceed normally. Stable. Leviathan suddenly felt stable. It is not difficult at all to successfully establish a foothold in this fairy world. It is completely possible to do it, and even develop to a certain extent. Even some extremely powerful and well-established old forces cannot be confronted head-on and see to the end. Who is more powerful? But a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. After some further discussion, Leviathan and the others plan to start developing from this ice and snow continent, which covers an area of tens of billions of square kilometers, has very low average temperature, and more than 90% of the area is extremely desolate, covered with ice and snow. The total population is not expected to exceed 100 million as a way to develop business. The starting point. Wait until this continent is captured, and then start the strategy for the next continent or planet until entering the prosperous inner circle. That's right. Although the radius of the fairy world is tens of thousands of light years, even if it normally sails inward at 100 times the speed of light, it will take hundreds of years to reach the core area. If it develops slowly, it may not be able to create anything big in hundreds of years. It is famous. But for the sake of safety and personal safety, it is better not to go to the inner bustling area from the beginning. Now work hard on the outside for a while. In short, you cannot be too ambitious. Next, Leviathan and others divided into 5 steps and developed steadily, with this uninhabited valley as the center. The first step was to set up camp, start up the most advanced 3D printer, and create a large number of industrial machines, such as brick-making machines that can process soil materials into bricks. We obtained a large amount of masonry materials, as well as specialized firing and grinding machines, water machine manufacturing machine, got bags of cement, as well as mining equipment, iron-making equipment, found a lot of iron ore, copper ore and other minerals, excavated a large amount of high-grade ore, and obtained a large amount of steel bars, copper ingots, and various nanomaterials solved material problems. The second step is to build a large camp, also called a base camp. It is said to be a camp, but above the surface is a city with an area of more than 100 square kilometers, and a solid city wall more than 50 meters high is built around the perimeter. It is impossible for an ordinary indigenous army to break through, if there are extraordinary cultivators who come to challenge. Unless they are in sufficient numbers, they will not be able to break through the city wall and enter the interior. Anyway, the price for forcing a break-in is probably their lives. In addition, the ground was dug tens of meters deep, with at least a dozen floors, and a large number of industrial equipment and assembly lines were placed in the underground city to avoid being affected by the cold outside. Therefore, no matter how cold it is outside, these underground factories, they can all function and work normally, continuously producing countless goods and materials. The third step, after the construction of the base camp is completed, is to find a way to assemble a nuclear fusion reactor with a maximum power generation of not less than 100 million kW, using common light elements as raw materials, and then using the energy generated by the reactor to it melts ice and snow to provide energy for indoor vertical constant temperature agricultural factories, ensuring that crops, fruits and vegetables receive enough artificial light and always grow in the most suitable environment, thereby solving food and food problems. After all, once the problem of eating is solved, it is equivalent to solving 90% of the problems in this world, and the rest will be very easy. The fourth step is to have very sufficient food, and then send out a large number of flying probes to find the existence of the indigenous people on this continent. Once the whereabouts of the indigenous people are discovered, they can send some food and industrial products to obtain friendship with the indigenous people, gain their trust, and then find a way to attract them to develop and live in the base camp, provide them with work opportunities, build a better place for them to live, and live a happy life with sufficient food and a warm environment. The life here is like a beautiful dream, which is very different from the previous struggles in the harsh environment. I believe that as long as these natives come and join here, they will be less likely to think about leaving, and it is impossible to drive them away even if they are driven away. The fifth step is to deal with relatively large local forces that control some resources and force. Reach cooperation with them, gain their trust, or see if they can be conquered with strong strength. If they cannot be conquered, we also have to reach a relatively friendly cooperation. Try not to make enemies, and make more friends if we can. If there is really no other way, we should resort to some killing methods. After all, the competition laws of this continent are also very cruel. The weak sometimes end up being miserable. But the strong can often do whatever they want, and take away everything. Of course, Lee Leffen and the others don't want to take such a domineering road for the time being. If they can follow the king's way, they will try the king's way. If it doesn't work, they can only be more domineering and strong. As for time, Lee Leffen and the others plan to use 1 year to complete the construction of the base camp. At least to build a relatively complete industrial system to produce all kinds of needed industrial products. It will take another year to build a large number of giant vertical constant temperature agricultural factories, capable of feeding at least 50 million people. With enough food, no matter how many indigenous people are willing to join, there will be no need to worry about food shortages. Finally, spend another year dealing with the more powerful forces, using various methods to conquer them, and cultivate them into trustworthy subordinates and juniors to ensure that there is no possibility of betrayal. In this way, after a total of 3 years, this continent of ice and snow was basically in the hands of Lee Leffen and the others. With an area of tens of billions of square kilometers and a massive amount of nuclear fusion energy, the fuel was inexhaustible. A very stable rear base has been built in this way. If the work efficiency can be higher, it may not take 3 years to achieve absolute control, thus making it easier to carry out the next work and tasks. However, the 5-step plan has entered the implementation stage. Lee Leffen discovered that many things were simpler than he imagined. For example, the construction of the industrial system is supposed to take at least a year to complete. But the super artificial intelligence, Jingwei, carried on the Starry Sky Fearless, actually achieved 2 upgrades with the help of star core crystals and spiritual energy particles. The degree of intelligence has been upgraded from LV-18 to LV-32, and the performance has been greatly improved. Moreover, the artificial intelligence Jingwei also has very strong scientific research capabilities, strong ability to think and solve problems independently, greatly improved flexibility, and even using advanced 3D printers. More advanced printers were manufactured and parts were processed without loss of precision. Industrial manufacturing efficiency increased by more than 10 times. Therefore, it only took about 3 months to complete a relatively basic setup, but a very complete industrial system has been successfully built. And the time has been shortened by at least half, including the most important nuclear fusion reactor. It only took 2 months to complete. After some optimization, the maximum power generation power can reach 500 million kilowatts, which is several times the previous development target. A large number of intelligent robots have been invested to serve as a labor force for workers. And work efficiency has also been greatly improved. So less than half a year, the base camp base was completed ahead of schedule. And the internal facilities are very complete. The indoor temperature is an extremely warm 25 degrees Celsius, which can be described as extremely comfortable. By the second half of the year, indoor constant temperature vertical agriculture factories rise up one after another, like matchbox squares, appearing neatly on the flat land. Each one covers an area of hundreds of acres, and there are thousands of them. There are hundreds of layers, equivalent to tens of millions of acres of land in total. Under the illumination of never-extinguishing lights, crops can grow at all times. That is, as long as the harvest time is staggered. It means that fruits and vegetables can be harvested every day. There is never enough to eat. And there is no difficulty in feeding a population of 50 million. Of course, since no natives have been gathered in the early stage, most of the crops planted are staple food crops. After harvesting, they are stored in grain warehouses. They can still be eaten after being stored for 3 to 5 years. The loss is very low. If it doesn't work, they can be made into some. If shelf-stable food is not enough, you can build several farms to raise some pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks and rabbits, and turn the grain into more nutritious meat without worrying about waste. In this way, a livable city was built. The food problem has also been solved. Then, next, you can send out personnel and detection equipment to find traces of the local indigenous people, and then find ways to offer generous terms to recruit them to join. Chapter 302: The Surprise of the Natives. Lukto Halian, a 33-year-old middle-aged indigenous man. He led his family and tried to live on the edge of a volcanic fault zone in the middle of the ice and snow continent. He relied on the heat emitted by the underground volcano to transform more fertile farmland, grow a small amount of food, and feed his family. This volcanic rift valley, which stretches for tens of thousands of kilometers and has an average width of only a few kilometers, is also known as the Valley of Life. The underground heat energy emitted by the Rift Valley can only affect the surrounding area within 5 miles. Land, but because of the heat brought by underground volcanoes. More than 1/3 of the population of the ice and snow continent lives near the Valley of Life. Countless towns and manors have been established. It is the most lively and prosperous place in the ice and snow continent, where resources are most abundant. There are also the most contradictions and conflicts. Only, after countless years of use, various indigenous tribes and people suddenly discovered a problem that frightened them. The Valley of Life is heading towards death, and will soon become a lifeless Valley of Death. All possible measures must be taken to stop the continued development of this trend. Otherwise, the tens of millions of people living around the Valley of Life, well, the indigenous people had to find a way to leave this place, or immigrate to other continents to live in a new environment. Otherwise a disaster would be imminent, and no one would survive. What happened? What happened? When out, the magma river below the Valley of Life is about to extinguish, and the heat generated is greatly reduced. The direct effect is that the surrounding area of the Valley of Life is getting colder and colder. The temperature is getting colder year by year. The indigenous people want to catch a hunting. The prey resources that survive with the help of calories and nutrients, and the main source of meat, will also be greatly reduced. The annual output of the cultivated land and farmland next to the Valley of Life is also gradually decreasing. Originally the most prosperous and lively place on the ice and snow continent, the place may face depression and death. In fact, this trend is quite obvious, and most tribes have long felt it. After all, the Valley of Life, which is tens of thousands of kilometers long, emits massive amounts of heat every moment, melting the thick ice and snow into crystal colorless fresh water, and the land nearby is considered fertile. A large amount of cultivated land was reclaimed, and then irrigated with warm water carrying the heat of magma, and under the influence of relatively weak sunlight, a population of more than 30 million was covered. The Valley of Life can support an average of 3,000 people per kilometer, which has already reached its upper limit. But now, the 3 acres of land owned by Lutdo have now cooled down and are covered in ice and snow. They can only make a living by switching from farming to hunting, and run to the more dangerous valley bottoms to look for some small insects and beasts between the rocks and soil as food to feed a family of several people. There is a species called the small insects of life bug, are very rich in nutrients. They are abundant at the bottom of the valley and taste very good. If you are lucky, you can dig up hundreds of kilograms at a time and feed a whole family. Yuan experience the happiness of being full. But now more and more people are switching careers to be hunters. It is becoming harder and harder to find life bugs, and the competition among hunters is becoming more and more fierce. If it is finger long, it is fine. But if it is as long as an arm, life bugs can fight to the point of killing people, literally risking their lives just for a bite to eat. Lutdo's family also lived a life of long-term hunger. Most of the day, they lay on the Kong and slept, maintaining a state of sleep to reduce energy consumption, just like animals hibernating. In this way, the pain of hunger still haunts every family member every day, and everyone is skinny and dizzy. If he could no longer find more abundant food, perhaps his wife and 4 children would all leave him, leaving him alone, and he might even starve to death, becoming one of the countless people who died of starvation. The end. The world is coming to an end. The originally bustling Valley of Life may turn into a sparsely populated Valley of Death, no longer suitable for densely populated areas. Change the situation. Under such a situation, there were only 2 options before Lutdo. The first is to stay here and continue to persevere until death comes. Of course, there is also a glimmer of hope. Those powerful big shots may find a way to reactivate the Valley of Life and may build a giant formation by guiding the scorching magma deep underground to the surface and bringing heat and temperature again. His family can be saved and see hope of survival. But this possibility is very slim. The second is to leave decisively. Take your wife and children. Take all the valuable belongings and tools at home. Put them on a sleigh, and then head towards an older forest hundreds of miles away to the north. That forest has a long history and covers an area of millions of acres, which is simply countless. The leaves, thick bark, and wood inside the trunks of these trees are all food in their eyes. And for adapted to the long and cold climate, the indigenous people of this continent have long evolved the ability to digest all organic items. The digestive capacity of the intestines is terrifying. So even if they eat leaves and bark, they can barely survive. Later, the other tens of millions of indigenous people on the ice and snow continent continue to survive by digesting all food and reducing consumption while sleeping. God-given places like the Valley of Life are not normal places. Life is too comfortable and comfortable. As a result, when the environment changes, they are faced with the dilemma of needing to escape. After some confusion, Lutdo decided to take his family and tribe away from his hopeless hometown to find a forest, return to the cold coniferous forest, and live by eating everything from the trees. It was just a risk on the road. Unexpected factors like this would have to be avoided. The process of running hundreds of miles away in the face of severe malnutrition, in the vast snow, and unable to find the coordinates can undoubtedly only be described as a narrow escape, and the probability of finding it is very low. But this morning, with several people from Luke's family and dozens of people from other families, a small team of less than 100 people was formed. I brought everything I could eat. After leaving the Valley of Life, we set foot on the snowy land where the snow was so vast that we couldn't tell the direction at all. After only walking for one morning, it was difficult to continue walking. At first, many tribesmen fainted from hunger and could not keep walking. They could only set up camp and rest for a while. But after a while, waves of buzzing sounds came from the top of the head, getting closer and louder, and strong winds blew out, bringing heat and white materials. Finally, the buzzing sound stopped, and a flying device fell from the sky, fell in front of Lutdo and other indigenous people. What? What is this box-like device that fell from the sky? Lutdo and his clansmen were all confused and highly vigilant. They picked up the sticks and stones in their hands for fear of being attacked. This was a defensive posture. Buzz buzz. The plane door opens. First, a group of robot warriors walk down, holding weapons in their hands and stepping on the snow-covered ground with relatively neat steps. Then a man in silver uniform walked down and appeared in front of Lutdo and other natives. Zhang Shilong, one of the expedition team members, was originally on a mission of observation and search. But after flying thousands of kilometers, he did not find many traces of human habitation or civilization. However, he did not expect that there would be such a thing in this vast snowfield. The batch of indigenous people walking around was beyond his expectation and a surprise to him. After all, the mission given by Captain Leffen was to find traces of the existence of indigenous people. Walking up to this group of natives, I noticed the strong defensiveness on their faces. Don't be afraid. I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person who can save you. Put it down. Put down what you are holding first. There is no need to make such a gesture. I am a super nice guy from out of town. What are your names and where are you from? You guys look quite hungry. If you need some food, I can provide you with some food here. Due to language barrier, it took Zhang Shilong a lot of effort and a lot of friendly smiles to make Luke wait for the natives, relax his vigilance slightly, and no longer be overly defensive. Until Zhang Shilong waved his hand. A robot brought a large bag of the snack egg yolk pie was handed to Zhang Shilong's hand. And then Zhang Shilong handed the bag of egg yolk pie to Lutdo, and kept saying frustratedly, "Eat. I'll treat you to food. You're welcome." He gestured for a while. Lutdo reluctantly understood what Zhang Shilong said, reached out to take the egg yolk pie, then opened the package, took out packages of small egg yolk pies, and distributed one to each clan member. With nearly 100 clan members, just enough one for each person, there are only a dozen egg yolk pies left in the big bag, and they are almost finished. Eat. You guys eat. Have a taste. Zhang Shilong waved his hand again. Good. Luke nodded, opened the plastic packaging, took out the fluffy egg yolk pie, put it in his mouth, took a gentle bite, and then his eyes widened suddenly. This taste. This soft and fluffy texture. There's also this sweetness that I've never experienced before. And the taste of cream inside. How is it possible? Why is it so delicious? I have never tasted such top-notch delicious food in my life. It is far beyond my imagination. How can it be so delicious? By the time Luke came to his senses, the piece of egg yolk pie in his hand had already entered his stomach, and he had eaten it all, even the pieces of egg yolk pie that fell to the ground. He also squatted down, picked it all up and ate it into his mouth, unwilling to waste even a little bit. The behavior of the tribesmen was exactly the same as his, even more exaggerated. Some of them almost ate the plastic packaging of the egg yolk pie, which was also digestible nutrition. Finally, the tribesmen who were still unfinished cast their extremely burning eyes on the dozen egg yolk pies left in Lutdo's hands, and they all took steps towards him. Chief, give me another one. There is still one in the bag. Give me another one. Patriarch, I feel so hungry. Give me another one and I will feel better. Patriarch, I originally thought that today would be the day that I starve to death. But before I starve to death, can you give me 2 more of these? I only want the last 2. And I won't eat anything from now on. I am willing to starve to death. Just give me 2 of these in exchange for my life. Chief, give me 2 more. I won't eat anymore. I think I have lived enough, and I don't want to be hungry anymore. But if I can eat 2 more egg yolk pies before I die, I can die in peace. More tribesmen gathered over. There were even 2 tribesmen who were going crazy with hunger, almost on the verge of losing their minds, and wanted to steal the egg yolk pie from Luck Duo. What? What do you want to do? Do you want to die? Believe it or not, I will make it happen for you. Go back. Go back right away. Don't come around again. I'm going to hit someone. Lecter scolded and roared repeatedly. Some of the tribesmen were frightened by him and took a few steps back. However, most of the tribesmen still found it difficult to move and just looked at the remaining dozen or so in his hand. He is an egg yolk pie and may act irrationally at any time. See the scene. Zhang Shilong was very curious and surprised. He had no idea that a bag of ordinary egg yolk pies, which he usually didn't bother to eat, would have such huge magical power, causing such a small tribe to fall into civil strife. This shows that after seeing the food shortage in this land, he was suddenly full of confidence and fully confident to capture this indigenous tribe and let them join the Azure Chamber of Commerce, guaranteeing 100% loyalty. Seeing trouble happening again. Bang bang. Zhang Shilong clapped his palms to attract their attention, and then said, "Do you want food? I still have it here, and I can even make you full. You can eat as much as you want every day from now on. No. You will be restricted and no longer endure hunger. As long as you are willing to follow me, you will live a good life like heaven." He chattered a lot to these natives, and made a lot of pictures. But Lucido and the others could only understand a small part and guess the general meaning. But they did not make any immediate decisions. The gesture of worship was a little cold. After all, no matter how good the painting is, it is just a painting, not a real benefit. It is impossible to successfully fool them into working hard. However, until Zhang Shilong asked the robot to take out more egg yolk pies, ordinary bread, meat floss bread, sandwich biscuits, chocolate, dry noodles, spicy sticks and other snacks. They were all thrown in front of Luck Duo and other indigenous people. Several bags weighing hundreds of kilograms were thrown over and were robbed by the natives. In less than 10 minutes, the natives ate them all and tasted the taste of these snacks. "Master! Master! We are willing to be loyal to our master forever. I am willing to give my life for my master." Nearly 100 natives, led by Lucko, knelt on the ground and pledged their loyalty to the death. With only a dozen bags of snacks, they gained a group of loyal natives. Chapter 303 Heavenly Life. Conquer. Zhang Shilong successfully recruited the first batch of indigenous personnel. The price is just a bag of egg yolk pie and some other snacks. Loyalty is full. They followed the transport plane very cooperatively, and then flew to the base camp of Azure City. They were not worried at all about being sold, or becoming slaves and suffering cruel abuse. They did not have these negative concerns. After all, they had nothing to lose. They are all about to starve to death and freeze to death if they follow Zhang Shilong to a strange place. Even if they are enslaved, lose their freedom, and do heavy labor all day long, they can still accept the consequences as long as they can give them a mouthful of food, and just reward a few egg yolk pies occasionally. That's right. In the hearts of Lukto and other indigenous people, egg yolk pie is the most delicious top delicacy they have ever eaten in their lives, opening up an unimaginable world for them. As long as they can eat a few more egg yolk pies, they will die in the next moment. They also feel that they can rest in peace without any regrets. Soon, the flight took more than 2 hours. The transport plane lowered its altitude. It landed at an airborne airport in Azure City and stopped. The tail hatch opens. Lukto and the other first batch of natives walk out one after another, observing this strange city that they had never seen before with great curiosity. Their first sense is that the city is quite big, and the second is that it is warm. The inside seems to be warmer than the inside of the Valley of Life, which shows that there are many heat sources, which raise the temperature in the city and isolate it from sub-zero temperatures. The bitter cold of dozens of degrees brings a more comfortable body temperature, so you will feel very warm. Secondly, I feel that there are many buildings, and they are very neat. Beautiful. Beautiful. Strong and tall. They are much better than the igloos, shandong or mud houses they live in. There are also extremely smooth and beautiful roads, various machines coming and going, and other busy scenes. It made Lutdo and others extremely curious, feeling that everything they had seen in their lives was not as magical and advanced as what they saw here. Anyway, it was very powerful, just like a place where gods live. Subsequently, they were first sent to the hospital and underwent a comprehensive physical examination to check their respective diseases and check their physical indicators. Since most of them had physical problems of one kind or another, and some suffered from serious diseases, the hospital decided to first cure all their diseases and return them to a 100% healthy state, ensuring that they are no longer prone to physical problems. So after another 7 days, most of the bodies of the indigenous people such as Lutdo and others were well. All diseases and injuries were cured by medication or minimally invasive surgery. It can be said that the disease was cured by medicine, even if it was not completely cured. The mental state and physical condition have also returned to 70% or 80%. There is no serious problem. And they can also eat nutritious patient meals and receive unprecedented care and love. As for abuse, there is no such thing. They all felt like they were in a dream, and they didn't expect to receive such good care and treatment. And then, Lutdo and others were transferred again to a school-like place, and each of them was given several sets of uniform-style student uniforms. They were asked to stay in school, study for a period of time, and find ways to master some commonly used Chinese. At the same time, artificial intelligence will also participate in the deciphering and translation of indigenous languages. It strives to decipher the content of the dialogue through the rules of indigenous communication and dialogue, establish a language learning model, and use the intelligence of the artificial intelligence system, Jingwei. It is estimated that within 5 to 10 days at most, you will be able to basically decipher the language, achieve barrier-free dialogue with the indigenous people, and get more rules and methods from it. Finally, you will be able to completely learn the indigenous language well, and you will no longer be able to speak the language again. Communication difficulties arise. Until nearly half a month later, Lakota and the other first batch of indigenous people discovered a surprising fact. That is, they had been recruited for so long. But until now, in such a long time, they had not worked even for an hour. Every day is nothing but eating and sleeping. On average, everyone has gained more than 10 kilograms. And their daily meals are never the same for a week. Occasionally, they will be given snacks and fruits. And sometimes their mouths won't stop. It's so satisfying. Lutdo noticed something was wrong, and took the initiative to find the relevant person in charge of Zhang Shilong many times, expressing his hope to participate in the main labor and obtain what they need through labor. Otherwise they would feel very embarrassed. After all, if it were the original living conditions, even if you worked hard all day, the food you would get would be barely enough for one person. So you wouldn't be able to save much at all. The value of labor would be so low that it might not be as good as 1 or 2 ordinary wawatu. The so-called hard work means that it is impossible to feed a family. So except for those who work, most of the indigenous people will be in a semi-dormant state, lying in bed all day long, moving as much as possible, and minimizing energy consumption. But here, you can eat 3 meals a day, and there are no restrictions on the amount. There are also meat dishes where you can see the meat. You can add rice if you want. You can eat whatever you want, in addition to not being allowed to waste it. You can eat until you are full, as long as they don't go down. This is the place called Azure City. Even if they are driven away with sticks, they will not leave. Their loyalty has already reached a new level. What's more, where they live, not only do they share a bed, the internal temperature is very high and very warm. They don't even feel cold even if they wear single clothes. There are also quilts and pillows specially given to them. The quality of their sleep is very high. Sometimes it will be so hot that you will kick off the quilt. Heaven. This is paradise in their eyes. Sometimes some tribesmen even thought that they had actually frozen to death on the ice and snow long ago. This is the world after death. This is the paradise where souls live. Many tribesmen nodded in approval of this statement, including Lutdo. I think this speculation is reasonable, and I also think this may be a dream. But it is a dream that no one wants to wake up from. Then comes worry and panic. Lutdo and other indigenous people were very worried that they would not make any contribution to this place, and were afraid of being labeled as trash that only eats and sleeps, with no use value at all, and would then be decisively abandoned. Therefore, Lutdo took the initiative to find them that day. I met Zhang Shilong and told him this. My kind master, hurry up and arrange something suitable for us to do. We have rested for a long time, and our bodies have recovered well. We can already do some of the labor we should do. We want to prove our worth. Please give us a chance to repay you, the master. Otherwise, we will feel very uneasy when we sleep at night. We feel that our efforts may not be worthy of enjoying everything we get now. We really need labor and work. Even if you go mining, it requires a lot of physical effort and may even put your life in danger. But we are all willing to do it. We can endure hardships and can do something for you without any reward, just to take care of the food. Hear this. Looking at the indigenous people like Lutdo, who were kneeling on the ground and pleading, just wanting to prove their worth and reflect their worth. Zhang Shilong thought for a while, nodded and said, "You want to find some work and don't want to rest all the time. This is good and completely understandable. Let's do this. I will arrange for you to work in a breeding farm. The breeding farm requires a certain amount of work. Manpower. Since you are so anxious to find some work, then go to the breeding farm and give it a try first. You should be able to adapt to the work there." A breeding farm? Lutdo immediately smiled, bowed repeatedly and said, "Thank you, master. Thank you, kind master. We will definitely do things well and won't let you down." Other tribesmen also expressed their gratitude one after another. Subsequently, not far outside Azure City, there is the largest breeding farm. Lutduo and nearly 100 people, after a brief training, entered the farm, put on work clothes, and started their work, mainly responsible for the breeding of large animals such as pigs, cattle, and sheep. When they grow up, they will provide people with a large supply of meat. Surprise! Lutduo and others were very surprised. Big. These animals are very big. For example, beef cattle can weigh over 1,000 kilograms, and may even reach 1 ton when they are put into the market. Although there are also local animals in the ice and snow continent, they are due to the lack of food and energy. They are not very big. Similar to rabbits, there are actually large animals, but they are all legendary monsters. They gradually disappear or even become extinct. Therefore, only small animals survive. After all, in the case of lack of food and energy under this situation, large animals are more likely to become extinct, and smaller animals that consume less energy can live longer. In actual work, after being basically familiar with the process of raising animals, Lutdo and others were even more surprised and shocked, and received severe shocks again and again. For example, the feed that animals such as pigs, cattle, and sheep eat is beyond their imagination. Ordinary dry feed is rich in protein and sugar, and has a very good taste. Lutdo and others have tasted the taste of those animal feeds, and they are simply more delicious than all the delicacies they have eaten before. Like sweet biscuits. Generally, it is fragrant, crispy, sweet, very delicious, and rich in nutrients. After eating 1 or 2 handfuls, you will feel very full. It is much stronger than those leaves and barks, and its nutritional value is higher, 5 times, 10 times. The natives, can live very well and get sufficient nutrition and energy even if they eat these feed grains every day. However, in this farm, these delicious feeds are actually given to the animals. There is a certain amount of waste in food, and you can eat as much as you want. Almost an unlimited supply. These animals like pigs, cattle, and sheep are simply living in paradise. Even if they have to be slaughtered one day in the future, eat meat, but still have a pretty happy life. In addition to regular dry feed, these pigs, cattle, and sheep also eat some green feeds such as corn stalks and wheat stalks every day to supplement a large amount of fiber. Occasionally, they are also supplied with fruits such as apples, bananas, and watermelons, or ordinary vegetables such as greens, cabbage, and tomatoes. It can be said to be diverse, with almost everything, extremely rich. Shocked, because these fruits and vegetables, including corn stalks and chopped wheat stalks, Lutdo and others have also tasted them in their mouths. They are all extremely palatable food and contain quite a lot of nutrients, giving them to these indigenous people. It's all very well to eat, but so much high-quality food has been reduced to animal feed, and can be wasted as much as you want. Moreover, during the process of processing these feeds, Lutdo and other indigenous people also went to the vertical agriculture factory to help transport some fruits and vegetables. They saw the green crops growing well inside the farm factory, and the extremely terrible yields, as well as the extremely high quality of sweetness and crispiness, all made them feel dumbfounded. They just felt that the best crops they had ever seen were all in this factory. It was hard to imagine how many people it could support. Anyway, it was just a factory. The farm and factory opened their eyes and shocked them greatly. They were greatly impacted and strengthened their belief that they must stay. Heaven. This place must be heaven. Because the pigs, cattle, sheep and other animals here can all eat such perfect food. And they can all be fed without any limit. And then seeing the spectacular scene in the farm and factory, they will all kneel down if they are driven away now. They beg not to leave. Even if they suffered some abuse and endured the hardship of labor, they were willing to do so. After all, only valuable things can survive. They still knew these simple truths well. If they continued to be comfortable, they would eat and sleep. Sleeping and eating are worthless. So one day in the future, what awaits them will definitely be like pigs, cattle, and sheep, just in the process of working on the farm. Lutto and other indigenous people discovered that more than 90% of the workload can be completed with the help of machines. And there are not many places that require their hands-on work. For example, when it comes to feed processing and attention, they only need to assist the robot in pouring the feed ingredients into the processing machine. It is completely a hands-on job. The level of effort is very low. And you don't even sweat. For example, cleaning the breeding room can be done with high-pressure water pipes. Or letting robots enter the breeding room to clean. What Luke and the others have to do is at most handing over tools and cleaning up the garbage. Really. Very relaxing. There are also some safety patrols and the isolation and treatment of sick animals. These may be a little more troublesome. But once you handle them more times and your hands and feet become more proficient, you won't find it too troublesome. Then Luke and others will, after successfully becoming a full-time employee, they can get a salary of 2,000 yuan per month and continue to include food and accommodation. With this salary, they can buy some things and items they want, such as food, daily necessities, tools and machinery, etc. Their purchasing power is quite good. But after Lutto and the others receive their salary, their monthly expenses will not exceed 200, and all the rest will be saved to prepare for future retirement. That is, the savings rate is very high. Satisfied? Luke and other natives are extremely satisfied with their current living conditions and just want to live peacefully. However, one day, they felt a collective lack of composure and had a huge panic. Chapter 304 Lightspeed Integration. Sense of Crisis. Lutto and other indigenous people felt a great sense of crisis. Why is it like this? To the point where you feel restless. Don't think about food and drink. And can't even sleep well? Because there are new indigenous immigrants coming. Zhang Shilong and the others drove the transport spaceship and traveled to many places. Finally, they focused on the Valley of Life area, using food as bait. They attracted countless indigenous people. Groups of people entered the transport spaceship and started to join the Azure Chamber of Commerce and enter the Azure City resettlement. In just 1 month, more than 300,000 indigenous people were transported. And the number of relocations of at least tens of thousands of natives is increasing rapidly every day. It is estimated that in a while, the recruited indigenous population will definitely exceed 1 million. And the infrastructure of Azure City will probably be full. Then these newly arrived indigenous people will definitely consume a lot of food, occupy a lot of jobs, and will also work hard to prove their value, making the living environment of the indigenous people become more and more involution, which was previously relaxed and comfortable. Life may not be saved. That's right. After seeing a large number of new indigenous people pouring into the Azure City, Lutto and other indigenous people immediately felt an extremely serious sense of crisis. They were restless, unable to eat or sleep well. The reason is very simple. This continent of ice and snow is a place that has been involuted to the extreme. Although there are less than 100 million indigenous people living on tens of billions of square kilometers of land, it can be said that the land is vast and sparsely populated, and the per capita resources are extremely rich. It stands to reason that this country will not be guilty of involution. Volume. Where it is easy to survive. Only, the energy here is simply too scarce. Plants are very rare and grow slowly. And there are only a few animals. As for the indigenous people, they can only live in a few places where there is a lot of underground heat energy. Nowadays, there is less and less underground heat energy. And there are more and more ice and snow that are extremely cold, which means that it will become more and more difficult to fill their stomachs. The indigenous people must work harder and achieve more results to prove that they have the qualifications and value to be juniors. Otherwise they will be ruthlessly eliminated and abandoned. Lutto and the others couldn't even imagine the consequences. That was the real nightmare and H.L. What to do? Lutto called all the tribesmen together, used their brains to think about the solution, and finally decided unanimously that they could only continue to evolve. They must be more capable and work longer than the new people, so that they can show that they are more powerful. The value of staying, rather than being kicked out one day. So after getting off work at 6 o'clock every afternoon, Lutto and the others still stayed in the breeding farm and continued to feed the livestock inside. At the same time, they cleaned the pens more cleanly and neatly, and they devoted 200% of their concentration. He devoted himself wholeheartedly to the job at hand, making the livestock comfortable and improving their growth rate. He won an award for all indigenous people and became a good example for countless indigenous people to follow. But Lutto and the others, the first batch of veteran immigrants, still did not dare to take it lightly. They remained vigilant, and continued to adopt an inward-looking attitude, actively requesting an increase in the workload, often taking the initiative to work overtime, and staged various involution operations, for fear of losing the hard-won life and work. Have unimaginable persistence and stubbornness. No way. These are the rules of the ice and snow continent. In an extremely involutional living environment, if you relax a little, slow down a little, and make some compromises, you will become a miserable loser. Starvation is a common outcome. Most of the young and strong natives also understand this truth, and they are all on the road to becoming kings. They dare not relax or be lazy at all. Certain creeds are engraved in their bones, and they dare not gamble on the kindness of their masters and big shots, although that possibility exists. Once that kind of kindness disappears and only benefits are used as the judgment, then those with low utilization value can only be actively or passively eliminated. And this kind of involution was transmitted from the first batch of indigenous immigrants, like Lutto, to the second batch of indigenous immigrants. And then the second batch was transmitted to the third batch. It was like a domino effect, causing the indigenous groups have fallen into blind involution. Working hours have been extended repeatedly, and the overtime phenomenon has become more and more serious. Even if there is not much work for them to complete, they still actively look for something to do and then immerse themselves in it. Dare not relax at all. For this type of phenomenon, Lee Leffen, the president of the Blue Chamber of Commerce, had no choice but to stand up and give a video speech to all indigenous immigrants, giving them some ideological work. You no longer need to work so hard, and you don't have to worry about being abandoned and eliminated. The Blue Chamber of Commerce will bring them a completely different way of living, so that you will only live easier and more comfortably as you go. This is not just talk, but a fact based on two premises. First, our Chamber of Commerce has unlimited energy, which is this nuclear fusion reactor. The power generated by it every moment exceeds 300 of kilowatts, and can be increased to 500 million or even 1 billion kilowatts, which is equivalent to tens of millions of square kilometers of light energy, all concentrated in this device. And what drives it to run for a long time is the most common ice and snow. As long as about 10 tons of ice and snow raw materials are consumed every day, it can ensure that the power generation power will not decrease. Yes, only 10 tons of ice and snow materials, and a few people collecting it outside for a while, can ensure that the reactor will never drop, shut down, and have unlimited energy. Secondly, we can mass-produce robots that can replace human labor. The work efficiency of a robot is equivalent to that of a veteran worker. But our robots can work forever and do not need to rest at all, no matter how hard you work and involuntarily, and cannot be the opponent of robots. Your anxiety and tension are unnecessary. You will have places where you should show your value. You do not need to work 5 or 10 times as hard in some low-end labor positions. What we should do most is to study our knowledge and skills, strive to become a high-quality labor force, and enjoy the comfortable life of working only 8 hours a day, having 2 days off every week, and earning a high salary, instead of continuing low-level involution. There is absolutely no way out. So starting from today, everyone will work up to 10 hours a day and take at least 1 day off every week. As for the large amount of private time, you should find ways to enrich yourself, participate in some studies, and master some skills and knowledge. As long as if you have high-quality talents, you don't have to worry about being replaced. Of course, even if you have poor learning ability and cannot become high-end talents, you don't need to work overtime and struggle desperately. This will not bring additional benefits, but will only consume your time. The body, in short, can stop the meaningless involution behavior and engage in meaningful and benign knowledge learning. This is the most correct direction of efforts. However, we are very short of high-end talents and really need high-end talents. Those of you who are willing, if you are motivated, just work hard to become the talent that the Blue Chamber of Commerce needs most. After this speech, it did achieve quite good results. The phenomenon of involution has indeed been reduced a lot, and the indigenous labor force no longer exerts so much force. There are also some younger indigenous people with strong learning ability who are beginning to seek to learn so-called knowledge and actively want to become indispensable high-end talents and achieve true onshore, so that they can feel truly at ease instead of living in worry and fear. And in this little episode, after discussion and analysis, Lee Leffen and the team members discovered that the ice and snow continent was much more desolate and sparsely populated than they imagined. There was not even an indigenous city with a population of more than 100,000. And at most it was a town with a population of about 10,000. Secondly, there are very few relatively powerful and large-scale immortal forces in the local area, and they almost do not exist. After all, there is too little energy in various materials on this continent, and the valley of life has gradually changed. It has become the valley of despair and the valley of death. Those indigenous people and immortal cultivators who have some strength and resources have chosen to immigrate to other planes and planets in the past many years, which is the so-called run leads to the continuous loss of high-end power, and the continuous decline and degradation of high-end productivity, knowledge, organizational power, etc. over time. It is like a body that is constantly losing its vitality, gradually losing its vitality, and unable to see to any hope. Therefore, even if there are some extraordinary immortal cultivating forces, they are basically just a few cats and dogs guarding the mountain gate. There are very few immortals with powerful destructive power, and all high-end combat forces have left. They cannot bring any threat or damage to the Azure Chamber of Commerce, or even if the Azure Chamber of Commerce takes the initiative to cooperate with them. It is a demeaning behavior, and it is devaluing itself. Therefore, the previous strategy of soliciting cooperation should be adjusted. It is best to start the development and construction of this continent with me first. That is to say, there is no need for the Blue Chamber of Commerce to find a local snake, transfer a small part of its interests and resources, or even take the initiative to please in order to carry out follow-up work. This idea can be abandoned. Lee Leffen felt that they should be the boss and play an absolute leading role, and then integrate all aspects of this continent and speed up the development here, so as to create a sufficiently stable and reliable rear base in a short period of time, so as to facilitate the next step of development and adventure, and achieve play steadily and reduce risks. That is to say, Lee Leffen believes that these 30 or so people are sure to control the entire ice and snow continent and ensure that there will be no trouble and stability can be guaranteed. Soon, about half a year has passed. The ice and snow continent has undergone tremendous changes, perhaps even greater than those that have occurred in the past hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years. The number of indigenous immigrants in the Blue City has increased to tens of millions, causing the Blue City to have to expand its scale and increase the amount of infrastructure many times in order to accommodate such a large population. The number of indoor agricultural factories and farms has also increased by hundreds to meet the demand for rapidly growing food consumption. As for Lukto and other indigenous immigrants, during this period, they truly lived an unimaginably happy life. I can eat enough every day, never experience hunger again, and even have some symptoms of obesity. I can sleep very solidly and warmly every day, and I have never endured the bone-breaking cold. Every day is like a dream, for fear that this extremely beautiful life will leave me. Therefore, with the cherishment of today's good life, even though the Blue Chamber of Commerce reiterated again and again that there is no need to be excessively involuted, most of the indigenous immigrants are still very active and conscious, often taking the initiative to work overtime, and still have some involution. The purpose is to leave a good impression in front of the master, so as to avoid making mistakes in the future, or when some people need to be eliminated, they will not appear on the elimination list. There are also those high-end extraordinary forces on this continent, such as certain immortal sects, immortal valleys, certain holy places, etc. All extraordinary cultivators with certain strength come to Azure City to visit, and see this the prosperity and excitement of the city, seeing the unlimited energy produced by the fusion reactor, and the endless food in the agricultural factory, immediately changed my mentality. I took the initiative to find Lee Leffen and others, and then bowed and begged, join the Azure Chamber of Commerce, and be willing to contribute their part, just to be accepted. Lee Leffen and others were a little surprised by the investment of these high-end forces. But they soon came to understand and felt that it was natural. That's right. This continent is too cold and is very unsuitable for the survival of life. Even if there are a few places that can bring some life and prosperity, they are all based on the heat coming from the ground or created by using extraordinary magic. A small forbidden land can only cover a small area, grow a small amount of crops, and maintain the survival of dozens or hundreds of people. Once the population increases, even immortals will have difficulty feeding them. They would rather control the population or abandon their children, maintaining a certain balance, but actually very depressed and painful, unable to find a way to break the situation. But I didn't expect that the Azure Chamber of Commerce, an external force, could easily solve the two problems of energy and food. It consumed the simplest and most common raw materials, and they were inexhaustible. Breaking this problem, the ceiling of the continent can be freely developed from now on, without any restrictions or helplessness. Naturally, those extraordinary forces are also very happy to join the Azure Chamber of Commerce, instead of foolishly challenging them with force, which does them no good at all. This was also very conducive to the Azure Chamber of Commerce's lightspeed integration. It didn't take much effort to conquer all the indigenous forces and plan the next move. Chapter 305 Strong Rear Area. Another year later, after this period of efficient integration, and groups of immigrants arrived after groups of immigrants arrived at the Azure City, which has been expanding to a large scale. Lee Lethen's goal was basically achieved. Successfully acquired an indigenous population of approximately 30 million, subdued hundreds of immortal sect forces, and made nearly 10,000 extraordinary monks willing to join the Azure Chamber of Commerce, serve Lee Lethen and others, make their own contributions, and be loyal. The degrees are quite high, but the requirements are relatively low. As long as 3 meals a day are provided, their favorite delicacies are provided. As long as we provide a well-decorated house with an area of about 100 square meters, and a mid to high salary of 5,000 to 10,000 per month, plus a series of bonus systems. If we provide some retreat places with higher concentration of spiritual energy, suitable for practicing and improving strength, it can make those cultivators at the chi refining level be very happy to serve the Blue Chamber of Commerce. Even if they perform some more dangerous tasks, they will always be able to respond to the task. They are not afraid of danger, bursting out with quite good combat power, and even fighting to the death. Retreating, there is almost the potential to become a dead soldier. So these nearly 10,000 monks all joined the security guard group of the Blue Chamber of Commerce. They were equipped with a large amount of advanced equipment and weapons. After a period of professional training, they can be said to be unafraid of any danger and danger in terms of combat effectiveness. Challenge. Rear. A stable and solid rear is gradually forming and has initially acquired strong strength. No matter what kind of chaos may arise, it can be dealt with in a short period of time without causing unimaginable consequences. Consequences of damage. So in this case, you can be bolder and start new adventures. After all, there are too many civilizations in this galaxy, and there are countless powerful forces, as well as all kinds of overlords, strong men descended from the sky, and super geniuses. If there is not a stable and strong enough rear, Lee Lethen and the others may not be able to escape. No matter what the name, you will take a lot of risks. Only, the Starry Sky Dauntless launched a number of high-precision detection satellites to conduct detailed scans of the surrounding planets and planes, and even went close to conduct detailed reconnaissance, quickly locking in 3 comparisons. Great place to explore. Place A is a spherical rocky planet with a volume 10 times that of the Azure Star and a surface area of billions of square kilometers. It is extremely vast, and the average temperature on the surface is not high. However, due to the presence of a lot of geothermal energy, the underground magma quite a few, so there are many prosperous places that can be named Volcano Star. The indigenous population is at least 1 billion, and there are various resources, which have great development value. Anyway, this planet is definitely much better than the ice and snow continent. The concentration of spiritual energy particles is also very good. It is similar to the concentration of the ice and snow continent. Some fairy mountains and blessed places are even higher. The number of extraordinary people is, at least in there are more than 1 million. And there are many powerful immortal sect forces, which are by no means easy to control. It is estimated that there will be many difficulties, and a lot of time for them to actively join the Blue Chamber of Commerce without difficulty. Therefore, Place A is not the most cost-effective place, and has some difficulties and restrictions. Place B is a medium-sized continent, with an area of about 50 billion square kilometers. The central star in the orbit is slightly closer, and the light intensity received is 10% more. But the surface temperature is still very cold. Most of the place is covered by ice and snow, and it is destined to be not much different from the ice and snow continent. However, there are very thick soil and rock layers in the interior of this plain continent. And during billions of years of geological movement, countless underground cavity structures have been formed, which are very suitable for people to live in underground space. And there are many geothermal energy can feed a large population. In addition, there are many rare resources and spiritual stone minerals. And it can also cultivate a large number of practitioners and immortal cultivators. They can use their strong strength to further transform the underground space and make it is more suitable for survival and plays a great role. Therefore, this continent can be called the geothermal plain, and the total population must be in the billions. Place C is a completely frozen small plain with a surface area of about 100 million square kilometers. It is as small as dust, but the concentration of spiritual energy on it is extremely high, and the reserves of spiritual stones and other extraordinary products are very amazing. So this plain is ruled by a rather powerful immortal sect, with tens of thousands of masters, but mainly women. It is called the Ice Phoenix Palace. It is said that it is full of iceberg-like top beauties, who are not interested in any male. They were all dismissive of their false words. In addition, after practicing being Xi and Jew, they were all cold and rather arrogant. No one could get into their hearts. However, they had a lot of resources and many surrounding forces. They have all had the idea of getting involved in this Ice Phoenix Palace and capturing all the ice and snow beauties. But so far, they have all ended in failure. Instead, they have suffered heavy losses and have to give up their delusions. The above three places and forces, the resources and potential of each one are on the ice and snow continent. They are obviously better places where they can survive with higher quality. It is also the masters of the foundation building stage and above on the ice and snow continent who have gone there one after another. The destination of immigrants, the ice and snow continent, is still somewhat related to these three places. Maybe there are some masters whose hometown is the ice and snow continent. As for Lee Leffen's idea, they still plan to use commercial operations as a breakthrough point. Find a way to send 3 trade caravans. Establish strongholds or business warehouses in 3 places at the same time, as well as some warehouses to store large quantities of materials. And then let security personnel inspect them afterwards. These materials and resources will be sold to the local indigenous people to establish a strong business partnership. From then on, there will be a steady stream of transactions between you and me. Our Blue Chamber of Commerce has used the ice and snow continent as its base camp, reclaimed large tracts of land, and established countless indoor agricultural factories and farms. Therefore, the most important specialties in our hands are grains, fruits, vegetables, pork, beef, mutton, eggs, milk and other foods. Fill the bellies of the hungry, solve the problem of food shortage in many places, and make up for fatal shortcomings. As for the things we harvest, they can be spiritual stones, special ores that can make spiritual weapons, and other valuables. Learn from each other's strengths and offset our weaknesses. Through this kind of commercial transaction, we can get some of the things we need most. We don't have to resort to fighting and killing. Through peaceful business, we can get everything we want. After all, our food can be endless, and the resources we can exchange for should also be endless. In this case, we should adopt peaceful means to seize the business opportunities and avoid fights and consumption as much as possible. In this way, we can not only ensure the efficiency of resource acquisition, it can also ensure that we will not suffer losses, and we do not have to fall into endless mutual killings. Therefore, doing business peacefully and exchanging what we have is the best policy and the greatest advantage we have. Of course, the premise is that we have enough self-protection strength. That's right. After some discussion, Lee Leffen and others still set the development policy of focusing on business and peaceful transactions. They did not resort to barbaric plunder just because they had quite powerful force. This was actually the last resort. Although this method is the most efficient and yields the most abundant harvests, sometimes it is simply a costless transaction, and you only need to bear the risk of casualties. However, there is a huge gap in weapons and equipment. We have enough confidence to win at a very low cost, when the maximum gain can be obtained by reducing the loss. There are not many people who can overcome the temptation of conquering by force. Most of the strong people will probably choose a simpler and clearer way and just grab it directly. However, Li Leffen and the others still preferred civilized transactions instead of taking the shortcut of robbery. On the one hand, this method is ultimately evil and goes against justice. Even if you can show off your strength and get away with it for a while, don't expect to take advantage forever and not suffer losses. Moreover, the concept of karma is not very effective sometimes. Many bad people have done all kinds of bad things, can still live a long life and enjoy wealth. But some of them will indeed encounter strong backlash in the future and receive due retribution. The probability of this outcome is quite high. As long as there is hatred, there is a possibility of being swallowed up by hatred. Secondly, the Blue Chamber of Commerce does not need to use unscrupulous methods, nor does it need to plunder. The Blue Chamber of Commerce itself has a large amount of resources for transactions, and it has very strong competitiveness. There is no problem with self-protection, and it can deter those who are ready to act. If someone is blinded by greed and does something unwise, the final outcome will be extremely miserable, and they will only feel endless regret and despair. All in all, Li Leffen and others do not regard this treasure land as a place where they can just run away after harvesting the leeks. They want to develop and utilize it in the long term and pursue long-termism, rather than fishing for the best and killing the goose to obtain the eggs. Therefore, if we can avoid using force, we will never use force. If we can use commercial trade to solve the problem, we should use trade to solve the problem. Soon, after some time passed, the base and city established as the rear base camp of the Azure Chamber of Commerce were officially declared completed. Successfully created an extremely stable rear area, with an indigenous population of more than 35 million. Most of them are young and strong laborers who are able to endure hardships and have an evolutionary character. As a result, the Blue Chamber of Commerce no longer lacks a labor force and has a large number of willing and obedient people, workers. Secondly, more indoor vertical agriculture factories and farms have been established, which can produce hundreds of thousands of tons of various types of food every day, which can fully meet their own needs, and can also save most of the food and then process it. It can produce various types of convenience food and packaged food for easy sales, and millions of tons of convenience food have been stored in the warehouse, which can be used as the most specialty products for external sales. Finally, a relatively complete industrial system was established in the underground space of Azure City, and a large number of industrial products were mass-produced, such as daily tools, agricultural tools, daily necessities, and some mechanical and electrical products, etc. Be able to be very competitive in the market, and don't have to worry about selling products that won't have a market. For example, electric heaters use high-energy batteries or spirit stones as energy sources to generate electricity and heat the furnace. They have a very good thermal insulation effect and can instantly get rid of the influence of cold, allowing the body to gain heat and get rid of stiffness and coldness. There are also electric blankets, which can ensure a very good sleep at night and make it easier to fall asleep, instead of shivering in the cold and being very uncomfortable. Certainly, there is also the most important energy industry, as the industry that the Blue Chamber of Commerce is best at and the most expert in. Of course, it will not give up. Therefore, Li Leffen and the others have found ways to build multiple sets of small and medium-sized nuclear fusion reactors. The minimum power generation will not less than 100 million kilowatts. No matter which plane or planet you go to, it can be quickly started to generate massive energy, even based on these nuclear fusion reactors. Space energy facilities can be built and energy trunk roads can be established to use light energy. There is no need to lay a large number of cables and wires, and you only need to shine light to the places where energy is needed, although this will cause considerable consumption and dissipation, compared with the rather troublesome power grid transmission. This method not only saves a lot of time, but also reduces countless investments. Overall, it is very cost-effective and saves money. In this way, almost endless amounts of food. There are a large number of industrial products that are necessary for daily use, daily necessities that can improve efficiency and greatly enhance the convenience of life, tool products, and electronic products for entertainment, all of which are available. There is also a powerful energy industry that is the best at it, which can bring endless warmth and light to those forces that are trapped in coldness and inefficiency, allowing them to experience the infinite convenience brought by energy, coupled with very powerful force to protect themselves. Steady. This series of operations of the Azure Chamber of Commerce can only be described as extremely stable. The disadvantage is that it takes a little too much time, but it is not harmful. Li Leffen and the others can afford it. So after making extremely thorough preparations, this day, the huge trading fleet set sail. In the humming noise, ion engine maximum horsepower startup, a group of commercial spaceships weighing millions of tons slowly lifted off into the outer space, where the air content is very thin, and then headed straight towards the planet about 50 million kilometers away. As the first with the speed of the spacecraft, it only took a few days to reach the place where we planned to go to the planet, and we were looking for a suitable place to land. It's just that such a huge movement naturally attracted the attention of many powerful forces on the planet, causing a burst of panic and commotion, and many experts had to be sent to negotiate. Chapter 306 Axis Observation. Planet Brodo. A rocky planet with most of its surface covered in ice and snow. But beneath the countless ice and snow, hundreds of meters deep underground, in some areas where magma is rich in heat. However, there are a large number of underground cavities and traces of civilization. There are even underground towns and cities, and they are home to a large population and many traces of production and life. The largest internal space gap may be hundreds of meters high, and the number of rock layers may be more than one. It may be from top to bottom. There are more than 10 layers of traces of indigenous life activities. In some areas, there may be traces of many life activities deeper underground. That's right. This is a special planet with a large indigenous population, almost all of which live underground. Most of the main energy comes from geothermal energy, not the surface. But even for such a planet, there is a population of about 1 billion underground, which is quite astonishing. Much more than the hundreds of millions of people in the ice and snow continent, and has quite a long history. The reserves of spiritual stone mines within the planet, as well as special minerals containing spiritual energy such as purple cloud stone and red sky stone, are also extremely rich. It is an extremely rare high-resource planet. But as for the linkshare, it is said that it contains more than 100 billion pieces. About 30 billion have been mined, and there are still 70% of the mineable reserves. And spiritual stones, in this huge fairy world, exist like hard currency, are also energy like oil, and are indispensable wealth for immortal cultivators. The amount of wealth a cultivator has. The most intuitive measurement indicator is the number of spiritual stones on the body. There are many bustling and lively supercontinents close to the center of the sun. They have total reserves of spiritual stones, which are estimated to be tens of billions. However, I did not expect that in a small place like the planet Brodo. There are actually deep underground. There are so many spiritual stones buried in it. And even the concentration of spiritual energy particles in the air is significantly higher than that of other continents or planets. It can be called the paradise of cave heaven. Only, live on this amazing planet, and has so many resources. Then the indigenous people on this planet should live a good life and be quite happy. They must have an extremely good life overall, just like the people in resource-rich areas. There is no need to worry about food and clothing. Per capita income is very high. Productivity is relatively developed, etc. Is this what it is like? Shake his head. The 20-year-old native Axe had to shake his head to express his disapproval. Poverty. In fact, most of the people on the planet Brodo are at the bottom and have not benefited much from the abundant resources. The resources belong to the big shots at the top, and the welfare is mainly occupied by them. The people at the bottom are struggling near the food and clothing line. They need to work very hard to survive. Once something unexpected happens, they will fall into poverty and an abyss of debt that is difficult to pay off, and they will be unable to extricate themselves for a long time. Anyway, in his 20 years of memory, Axe has probably had a good meal no more than 10 times. He is usually in a state of hunger and semi-starvation. He is very thin, and his chest is full of ribs. He is not very tall, and his clothes are in tatters. He probably won't be able to wear new clothes for many years. He has long been accustomed to such a poor life. He has no dreams at all. Being able to survive and have 2 more meals is his dream. He does not dare to hope for other things. As for starting a family, he has no dreams. Under that condition, the young women he knew, all of whom were pretty, would rather be the concubines of those gentlemen than be the head of a poor family. Forget about it. The young Axe shook his head, getting rid of all the thoughts he shouldn't have, and then continued to engage in the more difficult and dangerous mining work, just hoping to get through this ordinary day safely. This day, Akers, who works in a certain mine, follows most of the miners, and works hard to mine some high-value purple gold stones. This mine is shallow buried, high grade, and has high reserves. The only shortcoming is, the higher you dig, Although you can dig out more high-grade amethyst, the temperature will gradually decrease, and you will feel increasingly cold and unbearable. This kind of mineral deposit, if placed in those warm plains, well, undoubtedly it is a top-notch shallow rich mine. But on the planet Brodo, it is a bad mine that the indigenous people are disgusted by. They dare not work in such a mining area because the surface temperature can reach as low as -60 or 70 degrees. For the indigenous people, who live in a geothermal environment of more than 10 degrees Celsius all year round, it can literally kill them, and their work efficiency will be greatly reduced. And because most of them are wearing thin clothing, the probability of losing their lives is very high. Therefore, almost all miners would rather dig deep mines than touch shallow mines. Once they dig through the ground and come into contact with the ice cap, they may freeze to death. This has happened before. Such an accident is so tragic that no indigenous miner can accept such an ending. But Axe still came here to work. The reason is that you can get 50% more remuneration, and the income you can save every day can be as high as 50 immortal coppers, a currency unit. One spiritual stone equals 10,000 immortal coppers. And in the underground world of planet Brodo, if you want to marry a wife, you only need to bid 8,000 immortal copper to buy a young woman with decent appearance, have a wife, start a family, and even give birth to your own children to continue the bloodline. That's right. Akers, who is 20 years old this year, could not restrain the fantasy in his mind. He went to work in this dangerous mining area, controlled his diet, and endured hunger every day, just to save 50 immortal coppers every day. As long as you save your salary for about 160 days in a row, you can save enough money to buy a woman. When you sleep at night, you can hug a more comfortable pillow to resist the cold together. In fact, most of his companions have chosen to live idle and have no idea of starting a family. Compared with him, Akers is like a minority, very self-disciplined and strict, and implements his own money-saving plan. The idea of carpe diem was thrown away and became one of the very few involutionaries. However, even if he has many progressive ideas in his mind, he wants to leave something behind to prove that he has been in this world. But the manager of the mining area sent many powerful monks today, planning to launch a huge operation. They plan to dig directly into the ground, collect the last tens of thousands of stones of high grade ore in one pot, and open a tunnel to a huge gap in the ground. Later, through this gap, the large area of ice and snow covering the surface must also be excavated and transferred to the interior of the tunnel, where it will melt into water resources that are much needed by the underground world. Yes, the underground world as a whole is still very short of water, and it is often necessary to collect, and however, because the surface temperature is too low, only a very small number of people have the ability to go to the surface to retrieve ice and snow, and they take very high risks. The mortality rate is quite high, because in addition to low temperatures, the surface environment also has strong winds and low oxygen content in the air. For low-level problems, breathing and walking are very difficult, not to mention mining ice and snow. Generally, only relatively powerful monks can complete this task and achieve relatively high mining efficiency. But this time, the management of the mining area just sent a large number of monks to mine the last batch of high-grade purple gold stones, and then drove all 3,000 miners to near the surface and asked them to collectively mine ice and snow. At least a few pieces of it must be collected. The amount of 1 million stones requires 3,000 miners to be exposed to the surface for at least 3 days. Otherwise, it would be impossible to complete such an arduous task of extracting ice and snow. When this so-called mission spread to the ears of the majority of miners through certain channels, they all exploded immediately and became very excited. 3 days! 3 days of collecting snow on the surface! But we are all mortals! Let alone 3 days! We can't even hold it for 3 hours! How can we last for that long? He obviously wants our lives. No, we will never do such a dangerous job. We want to go back and resign. That's right. I quit. Don't even think about taking my life as a joke. Just when the miners were clamoring to resign and leave. Rub, rub, rub. A large number of monks drew their swords one after another and approached with ferocious faces. They even directly hacked several workers to death, leaving them lying in a pool of blood and losing their lives. Hearing the order, if you don't do it, kill them all on the spot again. The hearts of all the miners, including Akers, sank to the bottom, realizing that they might have fallen into a trap. And there was a high probability that they would all be doomed. Ruined, Axe's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly sank to the bottom. He really didn't expect that just to get an extra salary of 50 cents of copper every day, just to save some money, he chose to work here. But he didn't expect that there would be a big trap waiting for him here. In order to make more money, he had to risk his life. And looking at the immortal cultivators around him, all with ferocious faces and grinning faces, Axe suddenly realized that he might not be able to survive this disaster. The 3,000 miners present had long been the predetermined victims. Not only in exchange for ores, they also need to exchange for a large amount of ice, snow and water resources. The wages they originally earned had to be plundered and eaten away, and the last trace of resources was squeezed out. Anger. Then came the anger. Endless unwillingness emerged in my heart. Some miners roared and shouted, picked up the mining picks in their hands, and planned to give it a try. Brothers, if you continue to mine, and you will freeze to death. Resisting will also lead to death. It is better for us to fight and forget it. We would rather die fighting than try to exploit us again. Fight! This world will not let us live. It will force us to die. If this is the case, let us die together. I can't survive anymore. If I fight with these superior bastards, even if I die, I have to use all my strength to inflict a little bit of damage on them. That's right. We are ants, and we are nothing in their eyes. In that case, let them see the counterattack of us ants. Kill! Let's die together. Since we can't live anymore, let's take a few noble people with us to H.L. The miners took out their pickaxes and other tools as weapons one after another, and each one screamed and launched a death charge. Each of them looked crazy and had no fear of death. They had put life and death aside and only wanted to pull one or two noble people back. I hope there will be noble companions on the road to H.L. Because all the miners were enraged. Even the timid and cowardly ones, knowing that their fate must be death, were extremely angry. They picked up the mining tools in their hands and charged as fast as possible to reach those miners. In front of the monks and mine bosses, he just hit the head with a pickaxe, using his greatest strength, without any defense at all, and just wanted to vent his inner anger. Bang, bang, bang. It's just that the miners are just mortals. When faced with those monks who have cultivation and great strength, most of them will be kicked to death or killed with a punch. They can't bring any harm at all. The combat power is the gap is huge. But even so, those who followed were still one after another, charging more and more crazily. Even if they were killed instantly, they did not retreat at all. Instead, they thought that this way of death was good. At least there would not be too much pain. The only regret, it cannot bring much consumption to those noble people. After fighting like crazy for half an hour, the number of miners who died on the charging road has exceeded 800, and is about to approach 1/3 of the total number of miners. But the ones behind are still charging, still working hard, with crazy faces on their faces. The number of monks responsible for resisting is about 50, although they are all in the chi training period, and each of them can be worth 100. But after killing hundreds of miners, their respective consumption is also very high. The spiritual energy in the body is about to bottom out. If it is replenished with spiritual stones, it will probably be too late. The miners are too crazy, and will not give them a chance to stop. It is estimated that in half a moment, the 50 monks will really be unable to withstand it, and casualties will begin to occur. The mine boss was also a little panicked and had to shout, "Dear workers, I was just joking. It was just a joke. I didn't mean to harm your lives. We won't dig anymore. We won't dig out the ice and snow on the surface until the purple gold of this mine is mined. After the stone is dug, how about I send you home? Add 80 cents of copper to your salary. Stop resisting. Put down the weapons in your hands. Stop your anger. And stop being impulsive. It was just a misunderstanding. It will never happen. If I hurt your lives, please believe in our guarantee. I will stick to my word and do what I say. If we continue to fight, you will just lose your life in vain, which is not worth it." Hear these words from the mine boss. A small number of miners were moved and suddenly became hesitant. But most of the miners still chose to ignore it and continue to charge, not believing the mine boss's pictures at all. Akers was also among the charging crowd. He slammed his pickaxe down and smashed a monk's head, opening an escape hole. Through this hole, he escaped very smoothly. Chapter 307, A Way Out. Escape. Escape desperately. Try your best to escape. Stay away from that place of right and wrong, and try to survive. After all, I am only 20 years old. Still very young. As long as I can live, there is no one who can't think about it. If I can survive, I must live by any means. Only, Axe found that his thinking was a bit simplistic. Yes, he successfully escaped from the mining area, killed a monk, and led more miners to find a way out. The mine bosses who had their own wishful thinking suffered a huge loss, and could only use their losses. It was a terrible description, and his reputation was completely ruined. No one dared to help him mine anymore. He was completely screwed up. He underestimated the strength of the ants' resistance and paid high tuition fees. Then he became angry with shame and vowed to catch the miners who escaped and kill them all one by one to save the face they had lost before. So dozens of monks were divided into multiple groups, and they used sound transmission equipment to communicate, cooperated closely, and arrested everywhere. In a short period of time, they captured hundreds of fleeing miners, and then imposed the most cruel criminal law. In the end, the head will fall to the ground. Through this cruel method, venting the inner anger also makes more ordinary miners tremble and feel cold. Faced with such oppression, they can only express their dissatisfaction. Buried deep in my heart, I was afraid of being targeted by the mine boss. Some ordinary miners even took the initiative to report and betrayed the same poor fugitive miners. This kind of reporting behavior did not receive any benefits or rewards and harmed the lives of similar people. However, in order to curry favor with the mine bosses, they actively betrayed their own people, and only there are many miners who have a favorable impression of the same person, which proves that there is no lower limit to the darkness of human nature. This also disrupted Axe's escape plan. He originally planned to return to his hometown and the place he was most familiar with. But Axe, who was afraid of being betrayed by his fellow villagers, had to give up his plan to go home and turn around. I went to some strange places and just wanted to survive. Akers is a smart man and has a flexible mind. He has escaped countless pursuits and became one of the very few miners who has not been killed. So far, there are probably no more than 10 miners who have survived. He is the lucky one. 1. Just to survive outside and develop in an unfamiliar foreign land. The first thing he faces is the difficulty of finding a job. There are many competitors, and he is a foreigner and is not taken seriously. Even if he has the same salary or even a lower salary, it is not enough. Kiki's was eliminated and didn't get much chance at all. However, Axe didn't have much money with him, so he spent it all after eating a few meals, and had to face the problem of starvation. As a native of the planet Brodo, being hungry is a common occurrence, and it is also common to be hungry for a day or two in a row. But no matter how strong his body is, he can no longer resist being hungry for 3 consecutive days. What's more, it's hard to find jobs here. Outsiders are not trusted and don't get opportunities. Even if he is half-starved to death, there are not many the locals sympathize, because there are too many situations like this. Even if you really starve to death, you can only watch indifferently, and no one will stand up to help. After all, it is too difficult to survive in this world. Now, no one is desperately struggling to survive. You can't accuse others of being unsympathetic. It's good to be able to protect yourself. So on the 3rd day of hunger, in order not to starve to death, Axe had to make a major decision. He brought a bag used as a container, and then entered a passage leading to the surface. He kept climbing up without daring to relax at all. Even as you go up, the temperature gets colder and colder. The body is also becoming more and more tired and heavy, and is on the verge of some kind of collapse. But no matter how uncomfortable it is, I can only grit my teeth and persevere, carry on, and strive to mine a certain amount of ice and snow on the ground. Bring it back and sell it to the people in the town. Because in the underground world, clean water is also a relatively precious thing. The supplies, even a small pot, can be sold for 5 immortal coppers. If you can bring back 100 caddies, you can sell them for 30 immortal coppers. The income is no less than mining. There is only a risk of frostbite from being frozen to death by the cold surface air. That's right. Axe planned to take risks again this time. Get some ice and snow supplies, bring them underground, and then sell them in exchange for some food to keep him alive. Soon, the surrounding environment is getting colder and colder, getting closer and closer to the surface. The light at the exit brought a rather conspicuous light, which shocked Axe. He immediately quickened his pace and rushed out of the exit at a faster speed, regardless of the cold temperature of dozens of degrees below zero, preparing to dig out some ice and snow as quickly as possible to go back. But the ice and snow near the entrance of the cave had long been mined by other people. There was no trace of ice and snow within a radius of 100 meters, indicating that all the grass around the cave had been eaten. He could only brave the biting cold wind. After walking for a while, I came to a place where there was a lot of snow on the ground. I loaded a lot of snow into the container at the fastest speed, and then prepared to take the ice and snow back to the ground. After the snow loading work is completed, return to the cave as quickly as possible. But before he entered the cave, a strong wind hit his ears, followed by a sharp pain in his brain, and he fell weakly to the ground. Attack! He was attacked. I even heard the attacker's proud laugh, thanking him for helping to dig out so much ice and snow. But at this time, Akers no longer had the strength to move. His body was extremely weak, and he could not get up at all. The attacker was pushed directly out of the hole and exposed to the outside. Obviously, he wanted him to die here. Don't even think about the possibility of turning over. It's over. This time it was completely over. The body is getting colder and colder, and the consciousness is getting blurry. Although Axe's heart was full of unwillingness and anger, he no longer had any strength or energy to fight against this unfair world and this unacceptable fate. I just hope that in the next life, I can live in a home with better conditions, eat more meals, marry a wife, and have children. At least, I will be better than the useless person in this life, Axe murmured in his mind, then fell into unconsciousness. Another unknown amount of time passed. Warmth. A warm feeling enveloped Axe's consciousness, making him feel very comfortable and light, as if he was in a cradle, with no discomfort anywhere. This made him couldn't help but open his eyes. White. The surroundings are all white. Very monotonous, but also very clean. Is this the world after death? Axe couldn't help but murmur, feeling a little curious. But when he looked around, he found himself lying on a bed, with a transparent mask on his face. He couldn't feel anything in his hands and feet, but he could feel his heart beating. You're awake, came an unintelligible voice. I was in a coma for 3 days, but I didn't expect you to survive. It's just that you were frozen in the snow for a long time, and your hands and feet were all frozen. I had to do a cut-off surgery on you, but we will install mechanical prostheses on you, allowing you to regain your ability to move. A strange man in a white coat stood beside the bed and looked at Akers on the bed. Who are you? Axe opened his mouth and asked, feeling very curious. I am Medical Officer Tang Jia. The detector released by our spacecraft discovered your existence and rescued you, Tang Jia said. In fact, after the huge commercial fleet arrived at the planet Brodo, they then looked for an entrance into the planet's underground. It happened that Axe was attacked that day and fell next to a hole. He was noticed by the detector, so Axe got away to survive. And the commercial fleet also found the entrance to the underground world. As for rescuing Axe, it was a simple matter. By the way, he also learned the culture and language of this world in order to establish communication as soon as possible. Soon, another 3 days passed. Through the artificial intelligence Jingwei on the spacecraft, the aboriginal language spoken by Axe was deciphered. Medical Officer Tang Jia was able to conduct some simple and not too complicated communications with him. Then through the artificial intelligence's translation function, a comparison was finally established. Smooth communication. So through Axe, a native, Tang Jia learned a lot of information about the underground world of the planet Brodo. For example, the population of the underground world is not low. Conservatively more than 1 billion, reaching a certain state of saturation. And because the underground world is fragmented, has a network structure, and is often blocked, it is difficult to form a large country. Instead, it has formed market towns or city-states, or the forces of some immortal monks, generally control areas that do not exceed 100 miles in radius. Otherwise it will be difficult to form a stable rule, because there are too many city-states and towns. There are also many conflicts between them. Conflicts and wars often break out. However, because of the existence of kinship ties, they will not develop to the point of endless struggle. In addition, they are channels for each other, and it is impossible to completely face breaking. The productivity is relatively backward. The food output is low, and the price is extremely high. Most of them are imported from outside. By exporting large quantities of ores and spiritual stones, the main industry is mining. The vast majority of the indigenous people are also mining to make a living. He became a relatively hard-working miner, but no matter how hard he worked, no matter how much ore he dug out, he faced huge risks. It was still difficult to achieve prosperity. Only a few mine bosses, monks, and a few businessmen could make it. It is relatively comfortable, but after all, it is the poor people who account for more than 80% of the indigenous population. Finally, it is relatively involution. In order to survive, you can only dig hard and get a small amount of reward. Occasionally you are lucky enough to dig high-value ore, and you can live a good life for 2 or 3 days. Mine. It is difficult to ensure enough food. Through what happened to Acres, Tangia realized that those higher-status mine bosses, or monks, may not be kind people. They may all have dark and hard hearts. And human life is in their eyes. They are just consumables. It doesn't matter how many people die. Even those with a lower bottom line actually want to kill the miners, and squeeze out the last value from them. This kind of evil can be said to exceed many capitals. Tangia had to report this matter to the Captain Leffen, and then held a meeting to discuss how to contact and cooperate with the indigenous people. I think we should probably take the upper-level route cautiously. Although this is a shortcut, the actions of those mine bosses and monks can only be described as evil. They have no bottom line and do not know what kindness is. With them, cooperating with those with low moral character will easily lead to betrayal and backlash, which is not necessarily a good choice. I think it is better to take the bottom line and send people to contact some poor and kind-hearted indigenous people, give some small favors and gain their trust. And then we can wholesale some of our products to them. Let them sell them. Seize the market for food, tools, daily necessities, etc. Let them become our business channels. Gradually open up the situation and develop into a group that supports us. In the beginning, there may only be 10 people working with us, but later on we can bring in 100, 1,000, or 10,000 small traders, and the number of vendors will increase, and they will all stand firmly on our side. They issue some powerful weapons. In this way, when they are attacked by mine bosses or some big figures, they can have a certain ability to defend themselves. They can even cooperate and help each other to jointly fight against some more powerful figures and establish a force of their own. 2 years, no, at most 3 years will give us time. Through this lower-level development route, we can open up a good situation, sell a large amount of goods, and get the spiritual stones and rare minerals we really want. If we take this for the upper-level route, those mine bosses may not cooperate or even pay attention to us. If we want to achieve our goal, I am afraid it will not be so fast. In order to compete with other forces, we cannot sell at a higher price. In short, the upper level is not an easy route to take, and we shouldn't be cooperating with those bad scumbags. After listening to Tangia's report, learn more about the personal experience of the indigenous young men Acres. Leffen fell into silence for a while, and then spoke after a long time. It seems that this planet Brodo is not a very bright place. Instead, there is countless darkness and oppression. The working people at the bottom are living in involution and pain. Just like ants. Generally, there is no law to protect their interests. In this case, we should help most people on this planet. If we stand on the side of those mine bosses and monks, we may be able to get a lot of convenience. But we will not give this the planet bring substantial changes. We come in a hurry and leave silently. Although we have nothing to lose, we have not left anything behind or changed anything. This is not acceptable. Although we are businessmen, this is just us. As a side job, our main identity is to be a great interstellar explorer and a wandering knight of justice. We always have to do good people and good deeds in order to leave many legends. So, Leffen stood up and said to everyone, do your best to contact the people at the bottom of this planet. Sell products. Open up the situation as soon as possible. And change the dark status quo of this planet. Yes. All the team members said one after another. Chapter 308 opened the situation. The major political policy of taking the grassroots route was quickly decided. A few more days passed. Aboriginal young man Axe is discharged from hospital. He put on the most advanced mechanical arms and legs, and installed a small nuclear fusion reactor on his chest. Although it was only the size of a water cup, it could release thousands of horsepower and drive the user to do countless incredible things. Not only does it have very high defense, when attacking, you can also fight with monks at the 7th or 8th level of Chi training without being at a disadvantage. The monk's ability to sustain combat is limited, but the nuclear fusion reactor can work endlessly. So as long as it can survive the early stage, Acres can easily gain the upper hand later and beat the monk. At this time, Acres also received a batch of startup resources to help him get started as soon as possible. And those good people did not take any money from him, so they sponsored his business for free. After he made the first pot of gold, all subsequent transactions would require pay the fee and purchase at the wholesale price. Acres also has his own ideas about what goods should be sold in the underground world. The first is clothes. Ready-made clothes. which will definitely be the most popular, because in the underground world, the environment is dark and easy to scratch. The service life of clothes is generally not long and easy to damage, resulting in many poor people either being shirtless or running naked for a long time. Like a savage, you have to abandon your inner shame. Secondly, there are lighting devices. Obviously, the underground world is very dark. Even though there are many crystal minerals with self-luminous properties, they will illuminate certain areas colorfully and shockingly. But most areas, there is still no such thing as luminous crystal, so you can only use items such as oil lamps and spiritual energy lamps. The disadvantage is that the cost of use is relatively high. Even those who are not mine owners or cultivators cannot afford these things and cannot enjoy the light for a long time. There is also food to eat, which will definitely be welcomed. After all, planet Brodo lacks food. Its own food production is very low, and its dependence on foreign food exceeds 80%. The price is generally expensive, and the quality is not very good. Anyway, it's okay if you can eat it. So it's mainly old grain that has been stored for 2 or 3 years. It is impossible to transport new grain with higher price and better quality, because the poor people in the underground world cannot afford it at all. Can eat rough, low-quality food, as well as various tools, products, daily necessities, etc. Each item is only purchased in small quantities, but Acres guarantees that it will be sold soon. Still go through the previous hole. Axe, carrying a large amount of merchandise, returned to the underground world. But this time, his mood became completely different. He felt that he had been reborn. He was no longer the mediocre Axe with only a little cleverness and extremely limited abilities. He had now undergone earth-shaking changes, full of explosive power, and even more timid and fearful in his heart. No longer exists. No matter what kind of big shot stands in front of him, he still has the confidence to deal with it. Even if he is bullied, he has the ability to resist. Even if it goes to the point of killing, he does not have the slightest worry. Just let go and kill without hesitation. The passages in the underground world are like a network maze. Unless there is a way to block all the main passages, even repeat murderers can easily escape. And because after treatment and strengthening, Acres' appearance has changed a lot. His mental outlook and personal temperament have completely changed. Even if he appears in front of some acquaintances, they will not be attracted by them. Recognized. Underground world. The temperature here is warmer, and some people are beginning to appear. Acres put his things in a wheelbarrow, entered a market town, and began to sell the goods he brought. Delicious food and snacks, cooking oil, snow salt, etc. Pretty strong and nice looking clothes that have been made. A flashlight that emits light, and a matching manual generator can bring a good lighting experience. And a wide variety of tools and daily necessities. When these small commodities were laid out and appeared in front of the town residents, it immediately caught their attention. After running over and asking about the price, I saw that the price of these good quality products is only half or even 1/3 of similar products. And the quality is even better. Purchase. The residents took out the immortal coppers and spiritual stones in their pockets and bought them in large quantities, fearing that if they missed this opportunity, they would regret it in the future. Sold out. In just one market town, all the goods that Axe brought were bought up, leaving nothing left. Axe had to return to the ground again and apply for the second batch of goods through the contact tool. This time he used his flexible brain and came up with a better way. Recruit a younger brother. He doesn't need to sell the products in person every time. There is no need for this. And the efficiency is not very high. It is better to recruit dozens of subordinates to act as his sub-distributors. Take the goods from himself and let them go to various places. By selling in market towns, the sales efficiency of goods is increased at least dozens of times. And Axe earns more money. In the future, he does not need to personally shout. He only needs to complete the purchase of goods. So it was a few days later. Acres established a small business gang, with more than 30 brothers under his command. They all listened to his words very much. And of course they were impressed by his force, especially because of the goods that Acres provided. All of them are very popular, with good quality, low price and reliable quality. They have instantly won an excellent reputation and are in a state of short supply. No matter how many goods Acres wholesales every day, they can be sold in a very short time. Burst. Make money every day. Count money until you become weak. Acres also specially purchased a few servants, bought a large house, lived there, and began to live a life of counting money until his hands cramped. And all his younger brothers were extremely respectful to him. He planned to marry 2 concubines. It has been put on the agenda to buy some more land and slaves, and live a life of great enjoyment. If it weren't for the fact that he still had some ideals and pursuits in his heart, and some vengeance he vowed to avenge, he would probably have completely degenerated. There won't be much difference between the mine bosses he hates the most. It's just that he didn't live this kind of enjoyable life for long. There was a loud bang. The door of the house was kicked open, and a dozen men with fierce looks rushed in, all holding sharply polished weapons in their hands. As for the purpose of their aggressive arrival, Akers basically guessed it without them having to say it. They were just businessmen who were unwilling to lose in competition. If they wanted to save their business, other than adopting such methods, there was probably no other way. Businessman Axe, please hand over your purchasing channel to me quickly, or I will kill you. Akers, don't think that we are afraid of you because you have found a big foreign businessman as your backer. You are blocking our financial path, taking away our business, and making it impossible for us to survive. In this case, we can only take you cent to HL. If you are willing to explain the purchase channel, we will still spare your life. Axe, it is not enough to be alone. Now that we have good channels, we should share them so that we can all purchase from there. Get good products instead of forcing us to a dead end. Axe, we don't want to come to this point, so we should explain it honestly. If you don't make concessions, our swords can only be directed at your head. It's fallen behind. Our patience is limited. I count to 3. If you still don't explain your purchase channel, we can only kill you, so that the big businessman will have to consider cooperating with us. 1, 2, do it! Kill! The strong men who entered the house all had ferocious faces. They raised their swords and were about to engage in a brutal bloodbath to completely drive away the power of the Axe Merchant gang. Humph! The mall is a battlefield. You actually want to play murder, so just save your lives. Akers immediately entered a fighting state, brandishing an exaggeratedly sharp knife in his hand. He swung it quickly and soon killed the provocateurs who came to cause trouble, killing them head-on. They were frightened. It only took 10 seconds. Axe then killed all the strong men without getting hurt himself, which can be described as extremely brave. This powerful strength also caused his heart to expand rapidly, and he no longer had any fear. Subsequently, he carried out commercial expansion without any scruples, recruited more brothers, imported more goods, recruited a large number of laborers, and opened up a wider channel to the ground, allowing large vehicles to pass through. The cargo carrying capacity increased hundreds of times. The number of recruits has also increased to several hundred, occupying more external markets, driving out all the previous goods merchants, and taking away all the business. Naturally, I also exchanged countless spiritual stones, ores and various types of hard currency, and I can make a lot of profits every day. Akers himself took part of these profits, most of which were handed over to the Blue Chamber of Commerce in the form of purchases, mainly from spirit stones and mines. Hundreds of spirit stones are turned in every year, which can be said to be a big harvest. Then, there is the continued expansion and crazy occupying of the market. However, the people of the underground world, who were already very involved and had a very hard life, saw so many high-quality and cheap products that they naturally abandoned the original products without any hesitation. He hesitated to choose the goods from the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Market share is constantly increasing. Sales are breaking records every day. This also made those traditional businessmen and mine bosses immediately regard the goods of the Azure Chamber of Commerce as a thorn in their side, and they wanted to suppress and expel them at all costs. Very fierce conflicts broke out between the two sides, and many mines the bosses and monks were bribed by traditional merchants to launch multiple attacks to eliminate the threat of the Azure Chamber of Commerce on a physical level. Akers was assassinated and threatened many times. Later, there were killers and assassins every day, trying to send him to HL. But every time he failed in high school and died under Axe's fist. After fierce battles, Akers was always alive and kicking, and he always had the last laugh. He could even launch counterattacks, take the initiative to attack, and achieve serious damage many times, achieving very good results. By this time, inevitably, Akers was really floating. Daily life has become more and more luxurious. The women around me are one after another. Gradually, he became corrupted and developed his own selfish desires. He raised the wholesale price several times and no longer considered the problem from the perspective of ordinary people. He even accepted the proposals of competitors and lowered the price of goods by raising prices. The cost effectiveness is used to increase profit margins, making the lives of many people at the bottom very difficult and tight. And they have returned to a state where they can only make ends meet, but have low ability to resist risks. The Blue Chamber of Commerce also noticed this situation and felt very sorry. They never expected that the boy who slayed the dragon would turn into an evil dragon. This transformation process took less than half a year. I originally thought that it would last for at least a year or two. But after suddenly becoming rich and enjoying things he had never enjoyed before, he could no longer control himself and resist the temptation brought by huge benefits, and became the new devil, even if he himself did not admit such a change. In this regard, the Blue Chamber of Commerce can only directly recruit more partners, like Acres, and open up more trade channels. Therefore, even if the sales of Acres goods are not growing well, the new partners they are still relatively honest, and have no thoughts that they shouldn't have yet. And the number of cooperation partners increases. It means that the channels for selling goods have also increased. The market share of traditional merchants has been further occupied and eroded, and losses are expanding every day. Although many violent and barbaric methods have been adopted, the effect is not obvious, and instead they suffer heavy losses, especially in the market. Consumers they have all become the most loyal customers of the products of the Azure Chamber of Commerce, and no longer care about traditional commercial products. Not to mention the prices are not cheap. Only fools would not choose products produced by the Azure Chamber of Commerce. In this way, after opening the market, the Azure Chamber of Commerce's income is increasing rapidly every day. Enter hundreds of spiritual stones every day. Earn more than 1,000 spiritual stones per day. The daily income is close to tens of thousands of spiritual stones. The business has been in business for more than half a year. In order to take root better, the Azure Chamber of Commerce also invested a lot of resources on the harsh surface of the planet Brodo, which was full of ice and snow. It built a city covered with a transparent glass cover and launched a small city. The fusion reactor generates hundreds of millions of kilowatts of power, and even maintains the temperature inside the surface cities at the most comfortable temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. For this reason, tens of millions of kilowatts of electricity are consumed every day. In addition, a large number of advanced factories have been built, attracted the attention of many top experts on planet Brodo, making them unable to sit still. Chapter 309 Full Control. Soon, by taking a steady approach, in just 2 short years, the Blue Chamber of Commerce quickly established a foothold on the planet Brodo and realized a positive cycle of income. It earned a huge amount of spiritual stones and various high-value fairy mines with magical properties, making a lot of money. And when the Azure Chamber of Commerce focused its development on the surface of the planet Brodo, it built thermal insulation glass cities one after another, and more nuclear fusion reactors have been built, bringing an extremely large amount of energy that is sufficient for use. A large number of indoor vertical farming factories have been built, and many breeding farms have also been built. All of them were put into use within 1 month after completion, reducing the production cost of fruits and vegetables to the lowest level, and then dumping them into the underground world. Although the profits are not special, it is rich, but it also occupies a very high market share, so that people living in the lower classes must rely on life-saving supplies. Without these cheap products, the quality of life will be in a mess, and there is no way to get rid of such dependence. But problems also arise. The commotion caused by the Azure Chamber of Commerce was indeed a bit big. Whether it was local gangsters, foreign businessmen, or some extraordinary monks, their interests were seriously damaged. They all regarded the Azure Chamber of Commerce as a thorn in their side and broke out conflict after conflict. Fortunately, in the face of the strong impact of these forces, the Blue Chamber of Commerce responded to them all, suffered very little losses, and launched several beautiful counterattacks, beating the opposition forces to a flying halt, causing heavy losses and complete loss. The power to fight back. After the Azure Chamber of Commerce built the glass-covered cities on the surface of the planet Brodo, their wide spaces, good lighting, and no risk of collapse attracted a large number of underground natives who poured into the glass cities, started a new life. And after I got completely used to it, I had no interest in returning to the underground. After all, the outside world is so wonderful, and the bright and beautiful starry sky is extremely shocking and beautiful. After experiencing all the conveniences outside, even though the underground world has some advantages, it is still far behind the glass city. The population and resources controlled by the Azure Chamber of Commerce are also growing continuously, with countless people taking refuge every day. The population absorbed exceeds 10 million. The absorbed population exceeds 30 million. It exceeded 50 million, soon approaching the 100 million mark, accounting for about 1/10 of the total population of the planet Brodo. Enough? To this extent, Leviathan thought it was almost enough. The mineral-rich Bulodo planet was basically under his control. The progress of the strategy is considered to be 100%. Even if there are still some hostile forces, they will not pose much threat to the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Subsequently, Leviathan's eyes were set on the next plane. And then he gave an order, and the huge commercial fleet was launched, heading towards this plane continent, but was intercepted by some experts. And after listening to the activity announcement of the Azure Chamber of Commerce in the end, he did not give up the blocking action, and even launched an attack on his own initiative, intending to block the fleet of the Azure Chamber of Commerce. However, the commercial fleet is too large, with tens of thousands of ships of various types, each with a load capacity of 10,000 tons and carrying countless supplies. Of course, the indigenous monks recruited as guards. Although they all know that the Azure Chamber of Commerce is the more hateful, foreigners have very evil purposes and are only interested in profit. Even if you don't want to do business, you are eventually forced to open the market and be dumped by a large number of cheap products. At first, you may think that this kind of transaction is very good, but over time, except the most precious resources are given to the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Ordinary commodities and specialties are not attractive to the Azure Chamber of Commerce at all. Slowly, countless spiritual stones and precious ores will fall into the hands of the despicable Azure Chamber of Commerce. And the original indigenous planets or planes will either be able to sell cheap labor or sell their souls and be reduced to serving the Azure Chamber of Commerce. He is a weak thug, but he only has no high-value resources to keep in his own hands. The most powerful big boss is always the aloof Azure Chamber of Commerce. The local aborigines can only get a small amount of remuneration, and they have to perform actively, often within volume, showing their respective loyalties, completely abandoning moral integrity. Therefore, any smart person can see through what the Blue Chamber of Commerce does at a glance and easily expose it, and will never be affected or brainwashed. Only, the Azure Chamber of Commerce is too powerful. The left hand used grain and various types of food as weapons. The price was very cheap, lower than the cost price of some grain-producing areas. Naturally, it was unable to compete with the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Slowly, the food market continued to decline until it was absolutely controlled by the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Secondly, there is a massive amount of energy with almost no upper limit. This is also an invincible sword. As long as there is a large amount of cheap energy, you can build some warm internal living and residential facilities, so as to experience a high-quality life. But that's all. I don't know how many monks have been attracted to join. After all, monks are also human beings, and they also have emotions and material needs. Therefore, compared with the deserted and boring caves, the VIP training room provided by the Azure Chamber of Commerce is more useful, and it is also more convenient. He will find ways to increase the concentration of spiritual energy particles hundreds and thousands of times, and greatly increase the speed of cultivation. With such benefits, it naturally brings great attraction to those monks, and joining becomes a matter of course. Anyway, under the two-handed strategy of the Azure Chamber of Commerce, under the endless benefits, the huge merchant fleet would naturally not suffer any losses. They quickly defeated those who overestimated their capabilities, and successfully landed in a relatively flat place in the middle of the plain. They then disembarked a large number of people, and moved a large amount of supplies. Established the first batch of bases with very fast efficiency, so as to achieve a smooth settlement, and then continue to deal with the indigenous people, have friendly contacts, and sometimes take the initiative to send some gifts in order to gain the favor of the indigenous people. 3 years. In the blink of an eye, 3 years have passed. This continent, which covers an area of 50 billion square kilometers and has a lot of resources, has also fallen under the commercial control of the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Basically, all major lifelines are controlled by the Azure Chamber of Commerce, and it has trained several obedient agents. Puppet, if the Blue Chamber of Commerce wants to make any big move in the future, as long as the summon signal is released, countless dogs and subordinates will go to participate. Even if they face some larger challenges, they can easily handle them and make some meritorious deeds. Those who are eager, even extremely brave and crazy, are completely willing to risk everything and just want to bet a big one. It doesn't matter if they lose, even if they lose their lives. So according to this routine, we continued to attack planets and planes one by one, and followed the example. Although problems of this kind would arise at the execution level, the overall strategic effect was it's surprisingly good. And there's nothing that can't be beat. There is a very mature and reliable routine. There are a large number of useful masters and lackeys. Although this very world is very huge, with many powerful forces, and some masters with extraordinary strength that can destroy the world. Even nuclear bombs cannot destroy them. When supergod mechas are sent on the scene, they can only fight. The Blue Chamber of Commerce has so many forces that it can't help but encounter. It can't be overcome in a short period of time and suffers heavy losses. There have been situations where Lefton's Team 6 of the 30 adventure team members paid the price with their lives during the development process, which can be described as extremely sad. But even the difficulties faced are infinite. Even some powerful people have to pay a very high price to level them and eliminate them. But in the end, the one who has the last laugh is still the Blue Chamber of Commerce. No matter how powerful the opponents and enemies are, they will either surrender or become the dust of history and become one of the losers. Even a certain super empire that occupied hundreds of giant planes sent out a huge army of hundreds of billions and fought fierce battles with the Blue Chamber of Commerce for more than 10 years, repeatedly gaining the upper hand and consuming countless manpower and resources of the Blue Chamber of Commerce. Resources, but in the end, this super empire still ended up disintegrating and completely collapsing. The royal family became a prisoner. The aristocracy was completely destroyed, and more than half of the plane became an area controlled by the Azure Chamber of Commerce. It was a complete loss. Why are these centralized super empires that can make full use of resources not a rival to the power of merchants? What is going on? What is the secret to the success of the Azure Chamber of Commerce? It's very simple. The core success factors are mainly 3 points. One is freedom. Adhering to the principle of free trade. As long as you feel that you will not suffer a loss. And I do not feel that I will suffer a loss. The transaction will be established and everyone will feel that it is very fair. They will not regret it afterwards, and even feel that they have made a profit. Even those who are willing to give to the Azure Chamber of Commerce, the working monks and extraordinary people looked at the extremely generous remuneration and welfare system, and were willing to risk their lives to work for the Chamber of Commerce. They were able to distinguish rewards and punishments. In the later stages, they even developed a set of specialized tools, based on the war system. No matter how many enemies are destroyed, and what tasks are completed, corresponding points and rewards will be obtained. And the rewards can be obtained within 3 days, which greatly improves the subjective initiative of the monks. Just like playing an upgraded martial arts, the game has achieved the visualization of all data, and everything is clear at a glance. With this war system, many workers in chambers of commerce are just like online game players, thinking about how to improve themselves and get rewards every day. And the degree of freedom is very high. Fully complying with the principle of voluntariness. If you feel there is something bad about Azure Chamber of Commerce, and you don't want to stay any longer, you can choose to quit at any time without any difficulties. There is a complete low-threshold exit mechanism, and there will be no embarrassment. Second, it is completely tax-free. The profit model of the Blue Chamber of Commerce mainly relies on large-scale dumping of various industrial products produced by itself. As long as there is a 30% gross profit, any product can be sold. It will not pursue excessive premiums and huge profits, and then relying on one level after another of agents. They control the entire sales network. Although the wholesale price of a certain product is only 1 yuan, after passing through the next level of dealers, the price rises to 1.5 yuan. And then, the next level below, the price has increased to 2 yuan. And when it is in the hands of consumers, the selling price may be 5 yuan or even 10 yuan. But consumers still love it and firmly occupy the market. However, in this dealer system, the Azure Chamber of Commerce only controls the supply of goods and will not tax anyone, whether it is the vast number of ordinary consumers or the supplier network. The Azure Chamber of Commerce only makes a few cents of factory gross profit. The bulk of the profits went to the dealers, and they did not take a penny from the countless people on their territory. They also took the initiative to use money to build roads, develop education, establish courts, and maintain the most basic. The rest of the order is left to the people to develop freely, sometimes to the point of allowing autonomy without excessive interference. As a result, the Blue Chamber of Commerce has poor mobilization capabilities at the grassroots level and is unable to exert its power among the people. It often talks about freedom and the like, allowing wealthy people to live in wealthy areas with good facilities, allowing poor people to live in poverty-stricken areas. forming a certain kind of values based entirely on money. It is very realistic, has little human touch, and has various drawbacks. It is not necessarily better than those over-centralized empires. Even so, in the area ruled by the Azure Chamber of Commerce, the favorability and support rate of the general public for the Chamber of Commerce is very high, generally above 80%, and in wealthy areas it exceeds 90%. They all believe that the order established by the Chamber of Commerce is the best and most humane system. No system can compare with it, because the countless forces in the immortal world, regardless of their mobilization capabilities and comprehensive strength, are all worse than the others in the eyes of the people, and none can surpass the Azure Chamber of Commerce. For example, some empires or kingdoms may appear powerful, but the people must collect taxes no matter what they do, such as poll tax, land tax, firewood tax, chicken and duck tax, and all kinds of endless corvée. The tentacles extend to the heads of every common people, but the burden they bring is extremely heavy. Life is extremely depressing. They don't even have the freedom to move. They live a life worse than death, like a slave. There are also forces that will not levy taxes indiscriminately, but they will take away all profitable businesses and monopolize them. The people will have no way to make a fortune. Even if the business is successful and has a lot of income, they will be targeted immediately, and the business will take them all away. And the only option in front of you is to work and be exploited, including in the officialdom. Ordinary people have no way to advance or make a fortune. They can only farm and work honestly. This is also a relatively bad situation. Over time, there will be countless dissatisfactions. Of course, the Blue Chamber of Commerce will also monopolize many profitable industries, but it will only make relatively small gross profits and give away the bulk of the profits. It will not restrict ordinary people from starting businesses, is willing to carry out fair competition, and even actively supports many industrialists who improve their own industrial system. Third, endless energy brings endless convenience. That's right. Energy is the biggest trump card of the Blue Chamber of Commerce. No matter what plane or planet it is, energy is the most important resource. It is related to all aspects of life. The Blue Chamber of Commerce has achieved a close to 100% monopoly on this, and the benefits obtained are greater than dumping industrial products. It is still bigger, and there are no competitors to challenge it, so it will naturally become stronger and stronger. Chapter 310 Final Chapter, Return. For the rest of the time, the Blue Chamber of Commerce did not change its strategy of playing it slow and steady, and continued to expand and extend its business reach. It also used the vast amount of spiritual stone resources in its hands to build a large number of Stargate passages, realizing super light transmission, like interstellar lines. Highways have established unparalleled transportation advantages, although some forces can also build teleportation gates, which can also teleport people to another dimension tens of millions of kilometers away. But compared with large Stargate passages, their teleportation distance is longer. It is short, cannot carry out large-scale freight, and cannot be open for a long time. Therefore, it does not have a competitive advantage compared with the Stargate channel. The other side, the Azure Chamber of Commerce has also established a large number of energy trunk roads in the space environment to facilitate the application of energy. It has also established a large number of nuclear fusion reactors to build a quite large energy network, covering countless planes and planets, especially the fairy world. In the outer cold zone, there are at least millions of planes and planets that rely heavily on the Azure Chamber of Commerce in order to survive better. Otherwise, as long as they return to the past lifestyle, they may not be able to survive for a day. Therefore, at least in the cold outer areas of the fairy world, all are die-hard supporters of the Blue Chamber of Commerce, and they are the basic base that cannot be pried away. With these basic forces, the Blue Chamber of Commerce will not fall into a state of collapse no matter how big a blow or heavy damage it encounters. Instead, he can quickly regroup and make a comeback, gaining the confidence that he will not perish even if he fails 10,000 times. The second is to strengthen the construction of industrial capabilities. While improving the construction of the logistics and transportation system, we must also improve the construction of the industrial supply chain, constantly upgrade factory equipment, and reduce the manufacturing costs of industrial products, especially for mid to high-end technology products. We must achieve absolute control and avoid being surpassed by the industrial technology of indigenous forces. It is necessary to achieve a monopoly on high-precision technology. To this end, Whalon Chamber of Commerce has never stopped its efforts in technology research and development, invested countless funds, trained a large number of high-level talents, established an extremely complete high-end industrial supply chain, and tried its best to sell at the lowest price in the sales process, especially for products such as chips. Except for the most advanced chips, which are priced higher. Mid to low-end chips are all priced at bargain prices. Even if some indigenous talents can make chips, there are not many in the market. There is no advantage in competitiveness, cost, and reliability. They can only be gradually eliminated and cannot survive. That's right. In order to firmly control the hegemony of science and technology, the Blue Chamber of Commerce has made many arrangements and many routines. It also knows that there are many smart people in the world who can maintain it without any advantages, even if they use certain technologies. Deified? This myth will eventually be broken one day. So after the power in the fairy world expanded to a certain scale, for the next few decades, while the Azure Chamber of Commerce is consolidating its energy hegemony, it is also establishing a large number of scientific research institutions and investing massive resources to consolidate its technological advantages, especially in terms of the development and utilization of the unique resources of the fairy world. Many fairy technology products have been derived, which have huge advantages and improvements compared with traditional technologies. For example, the working frequency of a chip made from special fairy ore can be increased 10 times without any obvious change in the amount of heat generated, thus greatly improving the performance of the chip. For example, with the help of certain special ores, the aura bomb produced is as powerful as a nuclear bomb without radioactive contamination. It is a very clean weapon of mass destruction. And in terms of power technology, based on the super light speed characteristics of aura particles, the aura-driven engine created has a 10-fold increase in power performance without any pressure. The only drawback is that it consumes too much aura. There is also some kind of space storage technology that uses a material called space-time stone to create space storage products with a capacity from 1 cubic meter to tens of thousands of cubic meters, such as space rings, space bracelets, space boxes, etc. Do not take up weight and can be carried around. They can be taken out and used at any time when necessary. Therefore, in the fairy world, space storage products are simply a must-have for traveling. However, such equipment was too expensive in the past and can be afforded. There are not many. Now the Azure Chamber of Commerce has the ability to produce and develop products with this kind of space storage capacity, and the output is quite considerable. Naturally, the price has dropped to a certain extent. Within the Azure Chamber of Commerce, managers with a certain level can hold a space storage device. There are countless other products developed using fairy technology. It also shows that in the field of fairy technology, the Blue Chamber of Commerce has gone very far and found a new path. Even in terms of life extension technology, there are many huge breakthroughs, and it is not impossible to achieve immortality, etc., etc. In this way, 50 years have passed. In the vast fairy world, after a long period of development, the Azure Chamber of Commerce is no longer as simple as barely gaining a foothold, but has become a giant. An existence that no Big Four dares to offend and can only fawn over. There have been more technological breakthroughs in science and technology. To some extent, they have surpassed the level of the mother planet Azure Star. Whether it is artificial intelligence, chips, medical treatment or energy utilization, they have surpassed them. Leviathan is fully qualified. This confidence, after all, the fairy world is too huge. The number of intelligent beings is extremely terrifying. And there are countless geniuses in it. Even if there is only 1/10,000th of the genius, if it is collected by the Azure Chamber of Commerce, it can develop a completely superior to the Azure Star. Hardcore technology comes out. They even developed a real super light engine to achieve real super light flight, which lasts for a long time and can fly at a maximum speed hundreds of times faster than the speed of light. It also has the ability to jump in space and teleport to places several light years away in an instant. At this time, Leviathan, who felt that he had gained enough, had the idea of ending this adventure and returning to his hometown in the solar system. This added up to nearly 100 years, and even he himself had never thought about what would happen after this adventure. The journey will take such a long time. But fortunately, the harvest is rich enough. Once you return, you can show off. Just like returning home in fine clothes. They just sent out multiple exploration teams to return home, looking for the way back. But they found nothing. Even the fairy planet next to the fairy world was difficult to find again, let alone return home along the original road. Disillusioned, the possibility of returning home is proving increasingly slim and approaching total destruction. The reason was quickly found. The fairy world we are in may not be the original universe at all, but we have unknowingly ended up in a completely unfamiliar parallel universe. Otherwise, there is no way to explain why so many extraordinary monks exist, and why individuals can master it. Such a powerful force. In order to speed up the previous time, the captain used wormhole jumping more than once to speed up the exploration spacecraft. However, the moment the wormhole was opened, the barrier between the two universes was broken down, and thus it was realized the journey across the universe has brought us to a whole new world. If we had flown slowly, even if we wasted decades, we might not have come to this magical fairyland. It may not necessarily be that the captain used superpowers to travel through the wormhole. It may also be that in the process of using the Stargate channel before, under the influence of the terrifying energy, it must be easy to break through a cosmic barrier. Things. Maybe we shouldn't charge the Stargate with so much energy that it leads to a whole new universe. There is no need to discuss how we travel through time. What we have to do now is to find a way to return to the solar system and our home on the blue star. We don't want to be lonely ghosts wandering outside, even if the outside world is very lively. The resources are very rich, and we can also master more powerful extraordinary powers. But our roots are still in our hometown after all. What we have to do now is to try every means to embark on the road back. Even if it takes a lot of effort, the price is even if you have to take a lot of detours. Yes, the development here in Fairyland is quite good. Under our leadership, our home has also entered a new era of high modernization, high excitement and entertainment. Countless interesting news stories are happening every day, and the further development of individuals in a few decades. It will definitely be better and more prosperous than my hometown. But I don't know why. But I still really want to go back to my hometown to see it, even if it can only be for a short time. I heard the emotional words of the team members. Lee Leffen immediately agreed. I understand what you mean. There are many unknown things in this world and this universe. We currently do not have the ability to decipher the mysteries. But since we have decided to go back to our hometown to have a look, then just make a plan to go home. Whether it takes 30, 50, or 100 years, we must find the pattern and the way home. Since we can come here, we should be able to go back. No, it should be a road with no return. If we cannot return home, our adventure can only be described as a failure. Let's continue to work hard. If we can really go home and build a ring channel connecting the fairy world and the solar system, I think this must be a huge contribution and will receive countless praises. It will become the greatest of human civilization. As an adventure hero, not to mention the company, the rewards must be extremely generous. Although we don't necessarily need rewards, we need to get this kind of trust and recognition. Yes, Captain. All the team members nodded. Subsequently, the development focus of Lee Leffen and others in the fairy world is mainly divided into three major parts. One is to continue to expand the sphere of influence of the Blue Chamber of Commerce, establish a more complete energy system, and radiate to more planes and planets, so that more than 100 billion, trillions, or even trillions of intelligent life will be under the influence of the Blue Chamber of Commerce. Under the radiation of power, it can also bring more business benefits. The second is to continue R&D and breakthroughs in the field of science and technology, and come up with a lot of fairy technology, develop a variety of perfect elixirs without side effects, and create a large number of fairy cars and magic weapons. So that fairy technology it will further develop and take advantage, and then gradually replace those traditional backward technologies, and embark on a new technological road. The third is to form many adventure teams, control the most advanced exploration spacecraft, and conduct tens of thousands of superlight transmission experiments to see if there will be a phenomenon of traveling to another universe, and to find a way, ensure that all these exploration spacecraft can return to avoid missing without news. It's just that hundreds of adventure teams were sent out, and a lot of resources were invested. A lot of results have indeed been achieved, but the definite and accurate shuttle law has not been found, and the shuttle formula of the universe cannot be summarized. As a result, there has not been much progress for more than 10 years in a row, which is frustrating. However, during the experiment, we found more planes similar to the fairy world, but some were gloomy and lifeless, which can be called demon planes, and some were very twisted and weird, which made people feel irritability and collapse can be called evil alien planes. Others are vibrant and extremely prosperous. Compared with the fairy world, they can be called divine planes. Such planes have been discovered. Quite a few. And it's right next to the fairy world. Not too far away. In this way, The future development of the Azure Chamber of Commerce will have many more directions for expansion, and it will not fall into involution. But there is not much news about my hometown. We can only continue to work hard. It wasn't until decades later that Lelethan was cultivating his space system ability. He didn't know what was going on. He moved his heart and opened a small portal with his hand. On the opposite side of the door was his hometown Azure Star. Return to his hometown. And if he wanted to return to the fairy world, Lelethan also had a way. Anyway, he had understood the laws of time and space, and he could go back and forth between the fairy world and the blue star as he pleased. This is the magic of the space system's ability. As for the blue star in the solar system, although hundreds of years have passed, earth-shaking changes have also taken place. The level of science and technology has experienced several explosive developments. The so-called dark energy technology has appeared. Its magic is not only as for the fairy technology in the fairy world. Energy technology has reached its peak. The utilization rate of solar energy has reached 50%, and it can instantly generate dozens of times the solar power. The energy is aimed at certain directions to attack, and its destructive power is unlimited, and nothing can stop it. Lelethan also met his grandfather Li Xingyang. He still looked like he was when he was young. He was in good spirits and energetic, but his memory was slightly declining. Everyone praised his performance and said that he had made a great contribution to the family. It also makes the Sun family not only extremely powerful in the material universe, but also unexpectedly able to gain a firm foothold in the universe. Yes, very good. These recognitions and praises made Lelethan very excited and said that he would perform better in the future and bring greater glory to the family.